Aelin is a Galathinius. Hi, welcome back. It is time for another video in our Kingdom of Ash recap series. Today we're going to be finishing up part 1 of Kingdom of Ash, which is largely the Battle of Anielle. Like, that is the focus of this section. So let's go ahead and do a super quick 10-second recap of where everyone's at. In the top left corner, we have the rescue crew, which is Rowan, Elide-Lorcan, Fenris, Gavriel, and Aelin. They rescued Aelin, and they are escaping Doranelle through this system of underground caves. They're in this little boat. They're almost out of there. Last we left them. Then we've got Aedion. Aedion and Lysandra are currently dealing with Morath directly. Morath has been battling the troops in Terrasen, and Lysandra is still currently pretending to be Aelin, and Aedion is being literally the most vile human being about it. Then we have Dorian and Manon. Manon is really having to grapple with her past as she is with these Crochan witches, and she is trying to convince the Crochan witches to make her like the witch queen in charge, because then she can authorize all of the witches to go to war, and they need the assistance from the Crochans in order to go to war. Great. At the same time, Dorian has decided he needs to go to Morath to get the final word key. And he's been practicing shifting as like a route to do this. And he's kind of like finally mastered it because he got a little pep talk from the ghost of Kaltain. Fun. And then we have Yrene and Kale. They are essentially just waiting for Erewhon's forces to descend on Anielle, which is, if we recall, Kale's homeland. They have the Ruckan support already, which is the giant bird people. The people aren't birds. They ride on the giant birds from the southern continent, as well as they know ground forces from the southern continent will be coming to assist later, but obviously they are a little slower than the birds. So they're just currently waiting on Anielle, kind of waiting for Erewhon's troops to descend on them. Okay, gorgeous. And that is actually what we'll pick up. We will pick up with actually Nesryn and Bort. Erewhon's forces arrive on the 5th day, so they like kind of estimated it would take between 3 and 5, and it actually took 5, which is lovely. We love that it took a little bit of extra time. Bort and Nesryn are currently kind of just like doing some surveying of the area and watching as this army approaches like down the valley. I mean, there's nothing really they can do as they just like watch the Erewhon's forces descend. And Bort is like, oh, these guys are going so slow. And Nesryn is like, I mean, they probably have like a lot of stuff. Like, they're hoping to take Anielle as like a city that's like going to be a gateway to the north. They're hoping to take Anielle and then be able to use that to like travel up to Terrasen. And Bort is like, yeah, I guess so, but like TBH, like if I were picking cities to take over, I would not pick this one. It is ugly. And Nesryn's like, yeah, I guess so. And Bort is like, I mean, don't get me wrong, landscape gorgeous. Look at that lake, look at those mountains, like stunning, but like the architectural style is kind of like not my fave. I would have chosen differently. And Nesryn's like, okay. And then the girlies just like giggle and tease each other about each other's boyfriends. Nesryn and Sartaq, I don't know if we've defined their relationship, but essentially they are dating each other. Sartaq is like, hello, I'm gonna marry you, girly, to Nesryn. And he's like, he knew he was gonna marry Nesryn before he even met her. It's very cute. Bort is in a relationship, or is engaged with the leader of another like clan in the southern continent named Yrene. Yrene is here too, and they're just like, I don't know, they're just giggling about boys. Let them live. They're about to go to battle. And today they're going to giggle about boys. It's unclear whether the army is coming tonight, if the army is like going to try to attack them tonight, or if they're going to wait till morning. Because by the time they arrive, it'll be like evening. You know, and like in the olden days, they didn't have lights. So at nighttime, you didn't fight anymore because it's too dark out. But soon enough, the war drums start. As soon as like sundown hits, Erewhon's forces have arrived, and these big bone war drums, they start like playing, and Yrene is watching this from up on the parapet, which is very like fourth wing. Kale and her gave their bedroom to a family who was evacuating from Anielle, who had like a baby. And remember, Anielle, the city, like evacuated anyone who could, fled into the mountains, and they took anyone who wasn't going to be able to make that mountain journey into the keep. And so they're housing a lot of families as well as like a lot of soldiers, because with the siege, you're essentially like protecting like the palace. That is like your primary focus. And they also know that these guys have big giant catapults, and they're probably going to start taking some walls out. And so no one can be on like the exterior portions of the castle, because, you know, someone might just like shove something in there with a catapult. And so there's like limited space for everyone. Chaol and Yrene find like a little corner, they spend the night, and then we pick up the next morning with Chaol meeting his father out on the battlements. Chaol told himself it was not his last night with his wife. He'd still made the best of it, and they had rested as much as they could stand before they were up, hours before dawn. Every time we're in Chaol's little noggin in this book, he is just thinking about his wife. Like, Chaol is such a wife guy, non-derogatory. I mean this in the best way possible. I love it so much for him. I think this is everything he could have wanted. You know, do you remember back in Crown of Midnight when he was like imagining his life with Aelin? They're like children together and they're like little family. Like, all Chaol has ever wanted is like a family. And he's getting it, and he loves his wife so much. Anyway, he goes out on the battlements to talk to his dad. The drums had pounded all night long. They had just like been out there beating the drums, and he is like so anxious about leaving Yrene behind, but he knows that it's time for him to go protect his city of Anielle. Got his cane like ready to go. He knows he's gonna need that, and then he's got his wheelchair on standby for the day because he knows Yrene will likely be healing a lot of soldiers all throughout the day and will drain her magic, and his back will at some point go out, and so he's like prepared for that inevitability. He comes out and his father says to him, "They used the bone drums during the last siege of Anielle," his father said, not a tremor in his voice. Legend says they beat the drums for 3 days and 3 nights before they attacked, and that the city was so rife with terror, so mad with sleeplessness, that they did not stand a chance. Erewhon's armies and beasts shredded them apart. And Chaol's like, okay, well, this time we have like the rooks fighting with us. We have like an aerial legion, which is like a pretty substantial advantage. And Daddy Westfall is like, we'll see how long they last. And Chaol's like, okay, if you do not have some hope that we're going to be successful, we will not be successful. Like, you do have to have a positive attitude. Otherwise, you're not going to inspire anyone who's fighting for us to try. And then Daddy Westfall is like, you know what, this is the opportunity I need to explain what actually happened with your mom and your brother. They actually like fled in the middle of the night. They like heard things were getting bad with Erewhon, and they were like, we are getting the heck out of here. Like, they're not planning on coming back. They're like so sick of me, which like, fair enough. Everyone is sick of Daddy Westfall. He is annoying. And Chaol's like, I don't know why you're telling me this. Like, I need you to like calm down and become a good leader to your men. If you're not going to do it, I will do it. But like, we have some bigger fish to fry right now. Like, do you see that giant army descending on us? Let's deal with that before we are like worried about like what my mom is up to. His father just looks at Chaol and says, you know your wife's pregnant, right? Chaol, of course, does not know Yrene is pregnant. He is so shocked, like so shocked, mouth hanging open. And his father goes on, a skilled healer she might be, but a deft liar she is not. Or have you not noticed her hand frequently resting on her stomach, or how green she turns at mealtimes? Chaol found literally dead in a ditch. Like, no, of course Chaol didn't notice. Chaol cannot notice anything. Chaol is the most unobservant little nugget, okay? He was captain of the guard. People were kidnapping him all the time, sneaking up on him, doing crimes, and he never noticed a thing. He's just not an observant boy. Yrene could have been the most obvious girl out there. She could have been holding her stomach and being like, ugh, every smell makes me a little queasy. I'm feeling really bloated. And Chaol would have been like, yeah, that happens sometimes. The food here, kind of weird. You know, like, she could have been picking out baby clothes. He's like, what are you knitting? And she's like, oh, just some baby socks. And he'd be like, sick, that's so cool. Like, Chaol doesn't notice anything until he is explicitly told. So anyway, now he's like, oh my gosh, we're about to have a big giant battle war. My wife is inside this castle and she's pregnant. And my dad is being the worst. I guess let's go fight. Like, that's all we can do. We leave them for a moment. We pick up with them pretty much exactly where we left them. They have buried like this LA war band of rebels. And also Manon has recently just saw Dorian shift. We'll talk about that in a second. Manon and the 13 had buried each and every one of the soldiers massacred by the Ironteeth. Their torn and bleeding hands throbs, their back aches, but they had done it. And then Bronwyn says to them, you and your coven acted honorably. And Manon says, you doubted it from the White Demon. And Bronwyn says, I did not think that the Ironteeth bothered to care for human lives. And Manon says, my grandmother has informed me that I am no longer an Ironteeth. It was the least I could do. You lead your witches well. I think it's important that Manon has this moment of like recognition with Bronwyn in which she is like, I can see that like what the Crochans is doing like works, and that leadership does not have to look the way it looked with my grandmother. I think this is like really important. This is a moment that Aelin had with back in Assassin's Blade when she went to went to the Red Desert to go see the Silent Assassins, and there was this real understanding and this conversation that happened between her and the Mute Master about what leadership looks like, and the fact that it did not need to look like Erebin. And I think Manon is having a similar moment here, and kind of has had that moment here with the Crochans over the past few weeks that she spent with them, and like really recognizing that leadership does not need to look like what it looked like with her grandmother. The Crochans leave and they're discussing whether they should go south to Elwë or just return home, like what they should do now, because they had initially planned to go assist Elwë, but now Elwë does not need their assistance anymore because there's no one to assist. And Glennis is letting each of the 7 hearths make their own decision. And so there's like little groups of witches all over, and Manon and Astrid are like talking to the side. Astrid says to Manon, "What do we do? Do we follow them or do we head north?" "I am a Crochan," Manon said, "and I am an Ironteeth witch." She flexed her fingers, willing the stiffness from them. "The Ironteeth are my people too. Regardless of what my grandmother may decree, they are my people, blue blood and yellow legs and black beak alike." She would bear the weight of what she had created, what she had trained forever. Astrid said nothing, though Manon knew she listened to every word, knew the 13 had stopped eating to listen to. "I want to bring them home," Manon said to them. The wind that flowed all the way to the waist. "I want to bring them all home, before it is too late, before they become something unworthy of a homeland." "So what are you going to do?" Astrid asked softly, but not weakly. And Manon doesn't say anything for a minute, and she thinks to herself the answer did not lie in picking one over the other. Crochan over Ironteeth, and never had. And Manon says to Astrid, like, if the Crochans choose not to fly with us, then we shall rally a new host, one that is already trained. And Astrid is like, "We cannot go back to Morath. Like, they will kill you so fast, Manon. We, like, cannot go back there. It is too dangerous." And Manon says, "We are not going to go to Morath. We are going to go to the Ferian Gap." Then we get a little flashback. So flashback, we did know that Manon caught Dorian talking to Kaltain and also caught Dorian as he shifted into a raven. And so now they're having a little meeting, a little chit-chat about, like, what the heck is Dorian up to? Manon's like, "Hey, buddy, when the heck were you going to tell me that you were going to Morath to get the final word key?" And Dorian's like, "Well, I figured you'd, like, kind of realize it when I left." And Manon's like, "Oh, yeah, when you flew off as a raven or a wyvern or whatever you decide to fly off on, right into Erwan's hands." The temperature in the clearing is plunging. What difference does it make if I had told you a few weeks ago or if I told you now? Like, why does it matter when I told you? Like, I have made my decision. I'm not asking for your input. I'm not asking for your assistance. I'm an adult. I can do what I want. This is Manon's response. Manon knew there was nothing kind, nothing warm on her face. A witch's face, a black beak's face. Morath is suicide. Erwan will find you in any form you wear, and you will wind up with a collar around your throat. Dorian says, "I don't have another choice." And Manon's like, "Okay, well, going to Morath is also not a good choice. Erwan will catch you. You need to choose something different. Like, make a different choice, my friend." And Dorian says, "I have to go. We will lose this war if I do not go. Do you not care about that?" And Manon says, "I care. I care if we lose this war. I care if you go into Morath and do not return, not as something worth living." Manon's like, "Remember how that conversation about caring? You're right, I do care. And I not only care about this war, but I care about you. And I care about you returning to everyone in your home safely, securely, in your right mind, okay? I met you when you were about a boy. And although we had a fun, flirty little time, I like you better as Dory." Then Dorian says to Manon, "And this is why I didn't say anything," he breathed. And Manon's like, "Okay, fine. You're going to go to Morath. Let's prove that you're ready. You're going to shift and sneak in there all by yourself. Let's maybe do a test run." And Dorian's like, "I don't need to prove anything to you." She gave him a wicked, brutal smile. "Then perhaps prove it to yourself. A test. We fly to the Ferian Gap with the dawn. Join us. We have need of a spy on the inside, someone who can sneak past the guards and tell us who lies within." She barely heard herself over the roaring in her head. "Let's see how well you can shapeshift then, princeling." Then he turned on his heel, aiming for the camp. "Fine, but you find yourself another tent to sleep in tonight." Okay. Ew. One, I do think that's Manon's tent. I do think Dorian did not pack camping gear when he left on this expedition. The 13, meanwhile, like, are used to, like, being on the run. You know, like, I think this is Manon's stuff. I do think Dorian has taken over Manon's tent in this situation. Like, Dorian needs to go find another tent. Dorian, you have to go sleep with Vesta. And whoever Vesta shares a room with. Sorrel? I think Astrid and Sorrel share a room. I don't know. But, like, no, I do think this is not yours. Flash to our rescue crew. They finally make it to the sea. They come out of the caves. They're at the sea, and they immediately head to the nearest, like, city to go to the nearest port. Lorcan and Rowan get them passage on a ship. They picked up all that treasure in the last section, and so they had plenty of money to buy them a passage, and they go ahead and send a message ahead to Aedion and Lysandra being like, hey guys, we got Aelin and we're headed back your way. They're speeding along in the boat, and Rowan is using his, wind magic to help make sure this goes as fast as possible. It's gonna still take them a couple weeks to get back to the continent, but that's fine because Aelin needs to retrain. She's lost like every single ounce of muscle on her body, and so she needs to like retrain, build her stamina back up, and that's what she plans to do on the boat. Like literally the first night on the boat, Rowan's like, we should go to bed, and Aelin's like, or another idea, what if we did some sparring on the deck instead? It's just a suggestion, but I think it's probably the best move. And Rowan is like, no, we need to go have a little private conversation, and then we need to get some sleep. And Aelin's like, okay, fine. And they have like the captain's quarters. So they have a private bedroom, and Aelin is just dreading this conversation. And they talk first about the fact that they are mates. And Aelin is like, I know that Elide told you everything about what happened on that beach. Like, you know that Lyra was never your mate, that I'm your mate. And Rowan is like, yep, I know. And Aelin's like, okay, well, I just wanted to check in and see how you're feeling about that. Like, do you wish it wasn't so? Which, when she asked this question, it literally breaks my heart because, like, they're both catches. Love Rowan, love Aelin. Also, Rowan is clearly obsessed with her. So I just, I don't know, it hurts my feelings that she's like, are you sad that we're mates? No, obviously he's not sad. Don't be a silly goose. And Rowan is like, why would I ever wish that? And Aelin can't even meet his eyes. She's just, staring out at the, sea around them. And Rowan says, Aelin, I do wish you had told me sooner, the moment you had realized it. But why would it ever hurt me to know the truth that was already in my heart? The truth that I had hoped for. Maeve is a terrible person. What happened to Lyra is terrible and will always sit heavy with me. It does not take away of the grief and the tragedy of that event. But you are not to blame. Literally at all. None of that was your fault. And, to be your mate is, such a gift. And then Aelin starts to explain some of the illusions that Maeve spun. Including one that, could have been their future if Erewhon had not existed and she had lived, a happy, normal childhood. This, version of the world in which she, meets Rowan when he's on, a trip to Terrasen as, a diplomat of Doranelle. This, really quiet, beautiful life. I wanted to believe that was the true world, that this was the nightmare from which I'd awakened. I wanted to believe that there was a place where you and I had never known the suffering and loss, where we'd take one look at each other and know we were mates. Maeve told me she could make it so. If I gave her the keys, she'd make it all possible. She wiped at her cheeks, at the tear that escaped down it. She spun me realities where you were dead, where you'd been killed by Erewhon, and only in handing over the keys to her would I be able to avenge you. But those realities made me... I stopped being useful to her when she told me you were gone. She couldn't get me to talk, to think. Yet in the ones where you and I met, where things were as close as they should have been, that's when I came the closest. His swallow was audible. What stopped you? She wiped at her face again. The male I fell in love with was you. It was you who knew pain as I did, and who walked with me through it, back to the light. Maeve didn't understand that. That even if she could create the perfect world, it wouldn't be you with me. And I'd never trade that. Trade this. Not for anything. Aelin laid hers on top of his callous fingers and squeezed gently. I wanted it to be you, he breathed, closing his eyes. For months and months, even in Wendelin, I wondered why you weren't my mate instead. It tore me up, wondering it, but I still did. He opened his eyes, and they burned like green fire. All this time, I wanted it to be you. She lowered her gaze, but he hooked a thumb and forefinger around her chin and lifted her face. I know you are tired, Fireheart. I know that the burden on your shoulders is more than anyone should have to endure. He took their joined hands and laid them on his heart. But we will face this together. Erewhon, the luck, all of it. We will face it together. And when we are done, when you settle, we will have 1,000 years together. Longer. Elena said the luck requires. We will face it together, he swore again. And if the cost of it truly is you, then we will pay it together. Hold on. We'll face it together, he swore again. And if the cost of it truly is you, then we will pay it together. As one soul in 2 bodies. Her heart strained to the point of clearing. Terrasen needs a king. I have no intention of ruling Terrasen without you. Aedion can have the job. She scanned his face. He meant every word. He brushed the hair from her face, his other hand still clasping hers to his chest, where his heart pounded a steady, unfaltering rhythm. Even if I had my choice of any dream realities, any perfect illusions, I would still choose you too. The next morning, Lorcan and Fenris are just glaring at each other across the boat. As one does. Fenris did watch Aelin get tortured for 2 months, also watched his brother get murdered in front of him, and it was kind of Lorcan's fault. Can we blame the boy? No. But Elide comes upstairs, and as soon as Elide comes upstairs, Lorcan literally doesn't have time to glare at Fenris because he needs to gaze longingly at Elide. Priority numero uno, gaze longingly at Elide. Always Lorcan's number one priority. And then Aelin and Rowan come upstairs. And Aelin is like, hey, Lorcan, do you plan to come with us to Terrasen? To join us in this war? And Lorcan is like, well, yeah, like, obviously I'm certainly not going there to, like, enjoy the beautiful weather in Terrasen. Like, it is freezing. It's snowing and freezing there. And Aelin says, okay, cool. So, like, I don't totally trust you. No offense, but you did cause my capture and torture. So, like, you know, a little wary of you. And in general, your vibes aren't great, like, to be honest. So I am going to need you to swear the blood oath to me. And Lorcan is like, why would I do that? Like, I'm helping you. I'm being so nice and generous and going with you to Terrasen to help you. Like, now you want me to swear the blood oath as well? There's no reason I would do that. Aelin looks pointedly at Elide and then looks back at Lorcan and says, because otherwise I'm kicking you off this boat. We cannot risk it. But if you swear the oath, you can live in Terrasen and do whatever you want. I want nothing from you, and you want nothing from me. The only order I shall ever give you is the one I would ask of any citizen of Terrasen, to protect and defend our kingdom and its people. You can live in a hut in the Staghorns for all I care, but I would not take something as precious away from you. Aelin is like, I know you have no reason to be loyal to me, but I also know that Elide is coming home to Terrasen. Like, Elide's primary focus, her primary goal is to go home to Terrasen, and to, like, support her queen, Aelin. And Aelin is like, I would not rob you guys of that relationship. And Lorcan is like, that is so sweet and so kind. But the thing is, Elide won't even give me the time of day anymore. Like, there's nothing there to save. There's no possibility between the two of us. Again, that hint of a smile and glance over her shoulder towards Elide. It is. Her turquoise eyes were as bright as she looked back at him, and there was wisdom on Aelin's face that he had perhaps never noticed before. A queen's face. Believe me, Lorcan. It is. But Terrasen will not survive this war. She will not survive this war without you. The choice is yours. Aelin is like, no, I've seen this film before. Rowan literally, like, slapped me in the face and bit me. And look at us now. You can really come back from almost anything. And Lorcan says, or thinks, he couldn't accept that possibility. Foolish and as useless as it was, he couldn't allow it to pass. Elide dying in the war. To have either Erewhon's beast or her uncle Vernon come to claim her again. Fool. He was an ancient, stupid fool. Yet the god at his shoulder did not tell him to run, or to fight. His choice then. He wondered what the goddess who had whispered to Elide made of this. Wondered what the woman herself was going to make of this, as he said to Aelin, fine. And Fenris is like, oh my gosh, are you serious? Gods, spare us. I cannot believe you're letting him take the blood oath. And Aelin is like, also, now you're going to both be in my court. Sort of. Lorcan less so, but sort of. I'm going to need you to stop fighting each other. No fighting to the death. And then there's some, like, lighthearted banter about how, like, okay, we're going to deal with Lorcan for the war, but then we never have to see him again. We'll just, like, invite him to holidays. And Fenris is like, no, don't invite him for holidays. Like, holidays are supposed to be a time of celebration, and they will not be a time of celebration if freaking Lorcan is there. And they, like, bicker. It's silly. But then Aelin gives him the blood oath. And my first thought as I was reading this was just, like, Aedion is going to be so livid when he finds out that now Fenris has got the blood oath. I think he's going to be cool with that one. He's going to be like, okay, you did, like, literally, we're going to die, and you did save my cousin's life in, like, a really real practical way. That's so sweet. You can have the blood oath. But Lorcan, the one who betrayed you and got you kidnapped in the first place, he got to take the blood oath before me? Aelin's just handing out these blood oaths like candy. Like, it's Halloween. She's got trick-or-treaters coming to the door. And Aedion is still, like, I don't know if he's still over the fact that Rowan got one. He's going to be livid. And then Aelin says, welcome to the court. Here's your first and only order. Protect Terrasen and his people. And then Aelin goes over to Elide and is like, hey, girlie, I just gave Lorcan the blood oath. I'm sure you saw that. I'm not going to offer you the blood oath, okay? No offense. I would totally love you so much. You're so cute and precious and would love to have you on the team. But because you are, like, the heir to Perranth, which is, like, the second most powerful house in Terrasen, it, like, would be seen as, like, a conflict of interest, you know? Because right now, there are, like, 4 houses that are turned against me, and so I need your vote to not feel like it has been corrupted. You know, like, I don't want people to be like, oh, has she just used her blood oath to make Elide pledge allegiance to her, you know? And Elide is like, totally understand. That makes sense. And then Aelin's like, okay, great. Glad everyone's on board. We're going to be training for the next few weeks. And then we go to Terrasen. We cut back to the witches, and they're on like a little witch wyvern ride, and Dorian is like slowly shifting. He's with Astrid on her wyvern because he's being a stinky little pill. And he's like, Manon's making me test myself before I go to Morath. Okay, two things. One, Dorian, Manon is not making you do anything. You are a fully adult person who can shapeshift. So you could have flown and turned into a bird and pieced the heck out of there immediately. I like don't think Manon, maybe Manon would have actually like tried to stop you. I don't know. But like, I really feel like we could have gotten out of this situation without doing this if we really truly felt like we wanted to. Two, this is a good idea. Like, you are about to go into one of the most dangerous places in the continent of Aurelia right now. And it seems like doing a test run before you do that is just like smart, like a smart choice. Anyway, so he's sitting with Astrid on her wyvern, and he is slowly like shifting himself, eyes and then hair and skin, like into a little witch girly. Manon had reported to Gladys and the Crochans their plan, and they agreed to meet with her back at the hidden camp that they first started at in the White Fangs afterwards. So they're doing kind of like a separation and coming back together because the Crochans still haven't totally decided what their plans are and what they're going to do next. So they're going to meet up back there once they've decided, and once they finish on this little side mission in the Ferian Gap. Then Dorian, who is like completely transformed, gives Manon the 2 word keys that he was carrying this time, and he says, I know that these might not be your priority, but they remain vital to our success, so please keep an eye on them. Manon's eyes had narrowed as she'd pocketed the keys, utterly unfazed, holding in her jacket a power great enough to level kingdoms. You think I'd toss them away like rubbish? Like, literally, Dorian is being so rude. Manon knows these word keys are important. In fact, she was the one who went through the witch mirror with Aelin and like heard the whole story about like how the like lock needs to seal the gates back up. Like, Manon is hugely aware of the importance of these word keys. She's also hugely aware of like the horror of the Valg. I know you had a Valg inside you, Dorian, but like, she saw Erwan. She like was interacting with Erwan on the regs. You know? Like, I don't think she's confused about what's going on here. Dorian continues, if I don't come back, you must get those keys to Terrasen. And Manon says, no, you're going to come back. Like, we're not going to even discuss backup plans because you're going to come straight on back here. And Dorian says, would you miss me if I didn't? Manon ignores him, and Dorian heads over to Astrid. And Astrid says to him, in and out, quick as you can. Astrid warned him, take care of Yrene. So he's taking Yrene into the Ferian Gap, and Dorian promises Astrid that he will protect Yrene with his life because he's a sweet boy and he knows the wyverns are important to the girls. Dorian takes Yrene into the Ferian Gap, and essentially he's being sent in there to see who is currently stationed in the Ferian Gap. Manon is just like pacing around waiting for Dorian to return when he flies on back and lands. He wasn't gone for actually like all that long, because literally all he did was go in and be like, who's here? And then leave. He's like completely unrecognizable. He's like this pale-skinned, dark-haired rider. And Manon's like, hey, what did you learn? What did you learn as you went into the Ferian Gap? And Dorian says, the matrons are not there. Only Petra Blueblood and about 300 Ironteeth from all 3 clans. His mouth curved in a cruel half-smile, cold as the peaks around them. Damning, the way is clear, Majesty. And then we get one of my favorite scenes in this part. So Manon lands, and then everyone is like freaking out because Manon is like, and public enemy number 1, and she lands at everyone, and she's like, hey, I need to talk to Petra Blueblood. And Petra comes to the front of the little cavern in the Ferian Gap where they're staying, and she said, I assumed so. And Manon says, gather your host. And Petra does. She gathers everyone together. All of the witches are there watching Manon, and Manon gives a little speech. The witches don't love Manon. They're like calling her names. They're calling her like you're just like a Crochan. And they're not being nice, but Manon doesn't care. And she begins her little speech. She says, all my life I have been fed a lie about who we are, what we are, that we are monsters and proud to be. But we were made into them, made when we might be so much more. My grandmother does not only plan to reclaim the wastes when this war is done, she plans to rule the wastes as High Queen, your only queen. There will be no blue bloods or yellow legs, not as you are now. She plans to take the weapons you have built here, plans to use our black beak riders and make you into our subjects. And if you do not bend to her, you will not exist at all. We have only known bloodshed and violence for 500 years. We will know it for another 500 yet. Liar! Someone shouts from the audience. And Astrid, from her wyvern, says she does not lie, and she undoes her shirt. She unbuttons her shirt and shows everyone her scar that she has across her abdomen that says unclean, that was like branded into her by Grandmother Blackbeak. And Astrid says, how many of you have been similarly branded by your matron, by your coven leader? How many of you have had your stillborn witchlings burned before you might hold them? Full body chills. The scene is so brilliant and amazing. And Manon goes on. You will be killed in this war or after it, and you will never see our homeland again. Petra says to her, what is it that you want from us, Blackbeak? Ride with us, Manon breathed. Fly with us against Morath, against the people who would keep you from your homeland, your future, an Ironteeth Crochan alliance, perhaps to break our curse at last. Again, that shuddering silence, like a storm about to break. Astrid sat back in the saddle, but kept her shirt open. The choice of how our people's future shall be shaped is yours, Manon told each of the witches assembled, all of the Blackbeaks who might fly to war and never return. But I will tell you this. Her hands shook and she fisted them on her thighs. There is a better world out there, and I have seen it. Literally goosebumps, like literally every hair on my body standing up on end to end. It's so good. I have seen witch and human and fae dwell together in peace, and it is not a weakness to do so, but a strength. I have met kings and queens whose love for their kingdoms, their people, is so great that the self is secondary, whose love for their people is so strong that even in the face of unthinkable odds, they do the impossible. Manon lifted her chin. You are my people, whether my grandmother decrees it so or not. You are my people and always will be. But I will fly against you if need be, to ensure that there is a future for those who cannot fight for themselves. For too long we have preyed on the weak, relished doing so. It is our time that we became better than our foremothers. There is a better world out there, she said again, and I will fight for it. She turned Abraxas away, towards the plunge behind them. Will you? Manon nodded to Petra, her eyes bright. The air only nodded back. They would be permitted to leave as they had arrived, unharmed. So Manon nudged Abraxas, and he leapt into the sky, and the 13 followed suit. Not a child of war, but of peace. Oh my god. Can you, like, I'm sorry, if this book was just about Manon, like it was just the story of Manon, which got literally all the other parts, this would still be a 5-star book. How is she's just a side character. Ugh, this scene made me remember that Sarah J. Maas's editors wanted her to cut the witches back in Airfire because TBH, I love Sarah so much, but the witches were kind of boring in Airfire. Nobody likes those chapters in Airfire, but worth it. Every moment was worth it for this. It is so effing good. Oh my gosh, for Manon to be like, I am finally a child of peace, to be like, yes, we were made into monsters, we do not have to be, and you guys are my people, but I will fight. I will turn and fight against you because I have decided, I have seen from Aelin and I have seen from Dorian, these king and queen who who put themselves second, that it is more important to fight for the people who do not have the strength to do so for themselves than it is to retain power. And then she just flies away. That moment with Astrid being like, how many of you have seen just unnecessary cruelty and brutality? Because I have. It's so good. Back on the boat, Aelin is in the middle of having a nightmare about being tortured by Karen. This time, in her nightmare, Erebin is also there. Everyone's favorite guys teaming up for a nightmare. And Erebin says to her in this nightmare, even Sam held out better than this, as she's being brutally tortured. Erebin continues, you could get out of those chains if you really wanted, Erebin said, frowning with distaste. If you really tried. You let yourself remain captive because the moment you are free, Yrene chuckled, then you must offer yourself up like a lamb to the slaughter. And deep down you're hoping you'll be here long enough that the young king of Ardalan will pay the price. Deep down you know you're hiding here, waiting for him to clear the path. Deep down you know it's not really fair that those gods picked you, that Elena picked you instead of him. She bought you time to live, yes, but you were still chosen to pay the price. Her price. And the gods... Do you see what I tried to spare you from all these years? What you might have avoided if you had remained Selena, remained with me. Do you see, Aelin? She could not answer, had no voice. Karn hit bone. Okay, she wakes up. This is vile. I didn't make a slide because Yrene is not going to grace my freaking screen. No, not for this nightmare. We're going to imagine in our heads she's dreaming. This is all pretend. This is in her head. She wakes up. And she starts to like get out of bed. Rowan wakes up and is like, hey girlie, it's the middle of the night. Like dawn isn't for another hour. Which if dawn hasn't happened yet, it's the middle of the night. And Aelin says, I'll just like go get warmed up. Like you don't have to get up yet. I'm just gonna go like maybe run a couple laps around the deck of the ship. Just like do some stretching, you know, that sort of stuff. Don't even worry about me. I'll just be like so warm by the time it's time for us to start. And they've been traveling for like 2 weeks and training the whole time we learn. And Rowan is like, oh, like, no, come back to bed or like get like, this is not a smart move, Miss Aelin. They actually had docked for a little bit the night before because of a bad storm. So they are currently in port in a city. And so they had gotten some updates on like what has been happening in the main continent. And essentially the updates from the main continent are war. War is happening. It is like chaos and terror in the main continent. And I actually think they might be back on the main continent now, just like in a more southern position. And so they need to like sail off the coast to get to Terrasen. Regardless, they got a little bit of update. And Aelin and Rowan are like sparring back and forth. And then Rowan stops and he's like, okay, we're done. We need to like go get breakfast. You literally didn't sleep at all last night. So like, we're not going to be out here for hours and hours without you eating, sparring. And Aelin's like, I just had some bad dreams. But I'm fine. Like maybe you're the one who's actually tired. And Rowan is like, no, I'm not. Let's go eat breakfast. And Aelin is like, I like ate a huge dinner last night. So I'm not super eager to eat breakfast again. And Rowan's like, don't care. You need to eat. And Aelin says, no, I need to train. Because for Aelin, the moment she like stops moving, the like trauma of what happened to her starts to like come back into her body. As long as she's like moving, she isn't thinking about being tortured. And so she like would prefer to keep fighting. And Rowan is like, okay, whoever wins the next round decides. And he kicks her booty in the next round of sparring because he hasn't been tortured for 2 months. Also, he's always been better than her at like sparring because he's like, you know, had 100 years more practice. Aelin is like, I can't go eat breakfast. Like, people are dying back on the continent. We've, like, heard the stories of, like, how terrible this war is. Like, my people are dying. And Rowan is like, I understand that. It is very, very tragic. You eating or not eating breakfast is actually going to have no bearing on that, except when we get to Terrasen, I need you to have the strength to help them. And right now, if you don't eat any food, when we get to Terrasen, you are going to be incredibly weak. So, breakfast. And so they go get breakfast. We actually catch up in the breakfast room after they've left though. Elide is eating this like super gross porridge that the captain has provided them. Gabriel is there. Rowan and Aelin have like already pieced out and left. And Lorcan strolls in and he sees that Elide and Gabriel are there. And he like immediately turns around and leaves. He's like, oh. They're like still not on good terms at all. Like the fact that Lorcan took the blood oath has not changed his relationship with Elide in the slightest. But Elide has been working with Aelin about an hour every day to learn how to read word marks. It is like very important that Aelin and Rowan have both decided it's quite important that everyone learns a bit of like basic word marks, because though that magic was like so valuable in unlocking her from her like torturing, but also just has kind of been pretty helpful throughout this like whole journey for her and like might come up again for them during this war. And Elide's having like a really tricky time because like she can't even read English. I assume the girlies here speak English, whatever the common language is. Remember, Elide is our illiterate queen. She can't read like normal words. So to be like, okay, now you're going to read word marks is asking kind of a lot of her. And she's a little frustrated. Also, like, someone teach her how to read. Teach this girl how to read, please. Aelin then goes on a run immediately afterwards, throws up her breakfast. She was working too hard immediately after eating, throws up her breakfast. And she is like out on a run in town and she like sees Fenris. Fenris took the like graveyard shift out in the village, and in wolf form he's just like been waiting and watching, and she like runs by him and she's She's like, oh, hey, you like took the graveyard shift. And he's like, oh, I don't sleep well anymore. And Aelin says, we could start a secret society for people who don't sleep well. And Fenris says, as long as Lorcan isn't invited, I'm in. He turns to her and blinks 3 times. Are you all right? A gull's cry pierced the gray world, and Aelin blinked back twice. No. It was as much as she'd admit. She blinked again thrice. Are you all right? 2 blinks from him. 2. No, they were not all right. They might never be, but if the others knew, if they saw past the swagger and the temper, they didn't let on. Oh, poor nuggets, these poor sweet little babies. And then Aelin starts asking Fenris questions about like Maeve and what her blood tasted like, and because Aelin is like very suspicious that Maeve is Valg. We obviously know she's Valg because we read Tower of Dawn, but Aelin was too busy in Empire of Storms and she did skip that one. So she suspects Maeve is Valg because for that one moment she saw black blood on Maeve, but like there has not been a lot of evidence to support that Maeve is Valg. So she's like, hey Fenris, when you took the blood oath, did it taste weird? And Fenris is like, no. But then before they can like really interrogate why Aelin is asking weird questions like that, Rowan returns and he just points at, he like lands next to them and he points at the sky. And then we cut to Anielle. We're with our girly pop, Yrene, our favorite Westfall. The Valg have been attacking for the last 5 days. So we're getting an update 5 days into this siege. And Yrene has been working on healing. She's barely seen Kale because both of them are like such crucial parts of this effort. Yrene is one of the head healers. We obviously also have Hafitza here, but Yrene is doing like a lot of work and she is also capable of doing those Valg healing. So I don't know if she's doing any at this point, but like if any Valg come in, she's the girly they're sending them to. She's been hard at work, and we learned that the Rooks are still like holding back the tide of Morath, but only because the catapults have not been able to breach the walls. Like the catapults have collapsed at a couple places in the keep, but they have not been able to get through the walls. And so at this point, the Rooken are still holding back the larger Morath Legion. But at this rate, Yrene is not sure how much longer they're going to be able to hold the keep. Like, it is not looking great. They are already running out of beds. Like, injured are literally on every crevasse of the keep, on floors, wherever they can stick them. It is very crowded. And she also thinks to herself that they should have brought more healers. They are feeling like very overwhelmed with the quantity of injured. Her power has been pretty drained. Last time she saw Kale, he was using his cane and like limping quite badly. And she's hoping that his chair wasn't in a part of the keep that was damaged and that he still has access to his wheelchair, because likely he will be needing it pretty regularly as she like completely drains her magic trying to take care of all these people. So that's where we kind of meet Yrene, and she's having this conversation with Aretia, who's another healer that is like a friend of Irene's from back at the tour. And she says, hey Yrene, like, have you rested enough? Like, if you need to go to sleep, let me know. Like, I can take over for a while. Like, I know you need to rest. And Yrene is like, no, I'm fine. Like, have you rested enough? And Aretia is like, I'm not the one who needs to be careful. Because literally everyone in this keep knows that Yrene is pregnant because she's not being super sneaky subtle, except Kale. Because Kale wouldn't notice if Yrene wore a t-shirt that said, with child. Bless his sweet baby heart. Aretia is like, with the baby. And she like gestures at Irene's stomach, which like, Aretia, mind your own beeswax. Yrene is the boss of her own body, and she can decide when she needs rest and when she does not need rest. Like, she's a healer who understands like the limitations and constraints of pregnancy, and also is the only one existing in this body. So like, give her some space. And Yrene is like, oh my gosh, how did you know I was pregnant? And Aretia is like, I mean, you haven't been subtle. And Yrene is like, okay, well, don't tell Kale. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to let him know. And Aretia is like, you might want to. Like, it's crazy that you haven't told him yet. You're, like, pretty pregnant. At this point, I think Yrene is, like, 8-ish weeks along. Like, she's, like, not freshly pregnant. Do you remember she, like, found out she was pregnant while she was still on the boat. They, like, left the boat and have been at Anielle for, like, almost 2 weeks now. So, like, girlie has known for a hot second. And Yrene is like, I will tell him when the time is right. I, like, don't want to stress him out more by letting him know about this child right before he goes into battle. Like, that just doesn't seem smart. Like, Kale gets stressed out quite easily, and then he doesn't make great choices. So, like, we're trying to keep him calm and centered, you know? And she's like, mind your own business, Aretia. Which, like, that is true. Aretia is really sticking her nose in places that it shouldn't be. Kale is on the battlements on horseback. He can't walk today, but he is able to still ride even when his back and legs have like completely given out because of like the adaptive saddle that they brought with them from the southern continent. The Rooks are getting tired and Morath is getting closer. The siege towers, which are these like big Siege towers are these like big like rolling structures. They can push up against the walls of a castle, and then there's like stairs inside, and then they can like get on. So rather than knocking down the walls, they can just like take like this essentially like giant like step ladder and get through them. You know those like kitchen towers that toddlers have where they like can stand at the counter and like cook with you? It's like the same concept but for a castle wall. And they're not going to cook with you. They're coming to kill you. Same idea. So they've been able to so far like keep the siege towers back, but they keep getting like very close, and a few men have even been able to like make their way from the siege towers, not connected to the wall, but like a little further back onto the battlements. And Chaol knows that based on kind of the way the battle has been playing out over the last few days, today was probably going to get quite ugly as things kind of escalated, as the rooks got tired, and kind of the Anielle forces are really getting worn down. But Chaol's focus went cold and calculating. His wife was in the keep behind him, pregnant with their child. He would not fail her. I'm sorry. Like, I'm such a Chaol and Yrene stan. Like, a stan. I just, like, love how much Chaol loves Yrene. Like, it truly warms my heart. Nezran is also watching from afar as the first siege tower does actually connect and reach the wall, and soldiers start like pouring into the keep. So finally they have, or not finally, makes it seem like I'm on Team Morath. I'm obviously not. I'm on Team Terrasen. But the siege tower does make it to the wall. They're unable to stop it, and men just start like pouring into the keep, and they're like trying to kill people. This is obviously increasing the number of injured like quite dramatically because they're now in like a hand-to-hand combat situation. There's already been like a lot of death in terms of the rooks and the riders, because although this force of Erewhon's legion, this legion of men, doesn't have an aerial legion, like there's no flying Ilkin or wyverns with them, they do have archers, and so they're shooting down rooks and rooken. And we're kind of explaining kind of like the structure of things. I'm not going to go into specifics of the battles, okay guys? I don't care. If you care, you can read the book. I assume you're already in the book, okay? I know I'm giving you a lot of details, but I assume you're also reading the book for the most part. But then a horn sounds, and Nezran looks eastward towards where the Dogon's cavalry foot soldiers descend upon the unprotected eastern flanks of Morath's troops, led by Hussar. So, yay! The foot soldiers have finally arrived, and of course Morath's troops were not expecting this. They weren't anticipating this. So the eastern edge of their troops are like completely unprotected. All of their forces were like pointed towards the keep, and so they're taken by a surprise. This is going to be great and kind of change the tides for our lovely, lovely city of Anielle. Meanwhile, Aedion is having much worse luck in his battles. Aedion and the Terrasen Legion make it to Perranth. Aedion and the Terrasen Legion make it to Perranth, and they're able to like stay at least like a day ahead of Morath. They go into Perranth to see if they can like gather any more forces, if they can get any more men, and like a couple more people are willing to join the battle. But Vernon, this is actually where Elide's from. Elide is from this region, and Vernon, Elide's evil uncle, made sure no one in the region had weapons because he was scared of an uprising, and so he made sure no one was armed. So they've added like a couple more soldiers, but like, you know, things are kind of not great in Perranth in general, and they don't have any extra weapons. So Aedion's like, well, that's not really great. He's also thinking about the fact that he hasn't seen Lysandra since he threw her naked into the snow. Okay, well, sorry, maybe make a different choice. I don't know what to tell you about that. And he's thinking about the fact that people are getting like a little upset that they haven't seen Aelin yet. That Aelin hasn't come and rescued them. Like, where is Aelin? Where is Aelin? Aedion like continues to like shut it down and be like, Aelin will come when the time is right. But he also knows that Aelin is not coming. So finally, they get to Perranth. They kind of set themselves up on this like frozen river, and Morath descends at noon on the second day as they're like waiting for them. And they are standing on this frozen river, and Aedion doesn't have any like major speeches prepared. Like he doesn't have like great words of wisdom because he knows that like a lot of men are going to die today. Like if they're able to be successful, it is going to be at a tremendous cost to them. And he's not even sure if it's like possible for them to win. And then we also find out that Aedion is using that shield that is Aelin's dad. We like saw it briefly in a flashback she had when she was being tortured by Maeve. It's a shield that is passed down from like ruler to ruler. And Aedion is using it because, I mean, like he's the general, but like also he's not the ruler. That's like that's Aelin's shields by rights. He like had Aelin's sword, he had Aelin's shield. He's just like using all of these things, and I like understand. He's closest to the crown, but he's not the king. So like he should not be using the shield that's only for rulers, in my opinion. In my humble opinion, like, find another shield, Aedion. But he hasn't. This is the shield he's using. And Aedion and the men are beating on their shields. I was going to give you a demonstration, but I feel as though you could imagine it in your little noggin. They're beating on their shields with their swords to mask the sound of the river underneath the Morath's legion cracking. Because remember their little scheme, their little plan that Aedion and Galen came up with. One heartbeat, Morath was marching towards them. The next, they plunged down, water splashing, shouts and screams filling the air. The Ilkin shot forward to grab the soldiers drowning under the weight of their armors, but the archers were ready to shoot down the Ilkin. And then the Valg princes almost immediately freeze the river solid again. Like they are this like trap of like, oh, we'll get them on the other side of the river and then they won't be able to get to us. Works for like a second, but like the Valg princes have no qualms about just like literally freezing all the soldiers that fell into the water underneath a layer of ice. And so they definitely lose like a substantial amount of men, but they have a legion of like 50,000, and Aedion estimates they lost probably 2,000 in the river. So just like barely put a dent in anything. It was really not that helpful of a plan, but like a good effort. Meanwhile, Lysandra is in wyvern form trying to fight, but the Ilkin had learned that a shapeshifter was amongst them and wore a wyvern skin. Lysandra realized it after she had swept for them, leaping from the army's ranks to slam into a cluster of 3. They're fighting, and they just like fight. This is like a long chapter about battling, and like I just like don't care. Okay, I think it goes poorly for Terrasen. Like they might literally be like taken over by sunrise. And the Terrasen soldiers like start realizing this. They're like, oh no, this is going like quite poorly. We're gonna die soon. And they start running. And Aedion's like, hey, stop that, get back here. We're fighting. We're like in the middle of a battle. You can't just run away and leave. But like, they're like, okay, well, we're gonna lose this battle and I'd rather be alive than not alive. Lysandra thinks to herself, it was over. Useless, Aedion had called her. Lysandra gazed towards the Ilkin feasting on the right flank and knew what she had to do. She shifts. And then we shift to Aedion's perspective and we learn that Aedion hears whispers that the queen is in the front lines. And Aedion is so excited. He thinks, Aelin has made it here. She's finally made it here. Like, she's gonna burn these guys to a crisp. But then he very quickly realizes it's Lysandra, and he freaks out and starts running because she's on the front lines. And again, Lysandra not only does not have magic, but also doesn't have fighting capabilities. Not at the level she needs to like fight the Ilkin. Like, she's just a girl. But the soldiers at the whispers that Aelin has returned slowly reformed their lines. When the call went out, again, the queen is here. The queen fights on our front lines. And Lysandra shifted not because she thought she was going to be able to like literally beat up the Ilkin. She's not an idiot. She knows that she doesn't have that fighting capability, but she knew that having Aelin with them on the front lines, fighting with them, that they were fighting for their queen, would increase morale, would prevent this army from just like literally disintegrating under Aedion's feet. It's working. She's saving the day yet again because she's the coolest girl anyone's ever met. So Aedion's like running towards her, and so he sees as one of the Ilkin descend on her and start attacking her, and she screams, completely defenseless in her human form. She shifted into like a very defenseless form. Like, she could have been like a wyvern, something like really fierce and able to defend itself, but instead she's just like a girl. Because she knew this was just like, she's sacrificing herself. She knows she's gonna die in this moment. And this moment in the book made me cry. I'm not crying now because Aedion's too dumb to cry over, but you mostly see this through Aedion's eyes, and he and I aren't seeing eye to eye anymore. I just like love Lysandra so much. The like bravery and self-sacrifice that Lysandra is willing to do for Terrasen. This land that she's like been in for like 2 minutes and like honestly hasn't been that like nice to her. It's not like this place has been nice to her, but because of her loyalty to Aelin and because Aelin's promise of like friendship and safety and stability, she has just again and again been willing to sacrifice every single part of her life for the betterment of Aelin and Aelin's people, because she trusts Aelin to make a better world. We don't really see Lysandra's growth happen. That happens kind of behind the scenes while she's not on the page. Selena was at Endovier, where Lysandra like takes Evangeline in, and like we saw this like very vapid version of Lysandra who was in competition with Aelin as like a 16-year-old though. This like I think they're probably like 19 or 20. This like 19 or 20-year-old version of Lysandra has just, as an adult in these like 3 years, has matured so much, and we didn't see that maturing when she shows up in Queen of Shadow, and she's already this like selfless force. Like, she's already so incredibly brave and selfless in the way that she's cared for Evangeline, and she sticks her neck out for Aelin, and even though Aelin was in many ways her enemy, and has just like continued to become more brave and amazing. We love Lysandra so much. What a queen. And then Aedion sees as Lysandra is like taken to the ground by these Ilkin, they put a like large slash in one of her legs. And he thinks to himself, he took it back. He took back everything he had said to her, every moment of anger in his heart. Aedion shoved through his own men, unable to breathe, to think. He took it back. He hadn't meant a word of it, not really. Lysandra tried to rise on her injured leg. The Ilkin laughed. Please, Aedion bellowed. The word was devoured by the screams of the dying. Please. He'd make any bargain. He'd sell his soul to the dark god if they spared her. He hadn't meant it. He took it back. All those words. Useless. He'd called her useless. Had thrown her into the snow naked. He took it back. You can't take it back, buddy. Lysandra held her sword steady, kept it pointed at the Ilkin in defiance and rage, ready for the death soon to come. She had been willing to give it up from the start, had agreed to Aelin's plans, knowing it might come to this. One shift, one change into wyvern form, and she'd destroy the Ilkin, but she remained in Aelin's body, held that sword, her only weapon, upraised. Terrasen was her home, and Aelin her queen. She'd die to keep this army together, to keep the lines from breaking, to rally their soldiers one last time. Her leg leaked blood onto the snow, and the two Ilkin sniffed, laughing again. They knew what lurked under her skin, that it was not the queen at all that they faced. She held her ground, did not yield 1 inch to the Ilkin, who advanced another step. For Terrasen, she would do this. For Aelin, he took it back. He took it all back. And the Ilkin, literally start, slicing Lysandra up. Just as Aedion reaches her, he, slices the Ilkin's head off, and he pulls Aelin back, or Lysandra as Aelin, back behind, the Terrasen lines, behind the troop lines. But the Ilkin got her with, a poison claw, and he needs to get her to heal her, quick, because, she is actively dying. But before Aedion can even deal with that, he looks up to the horizon, and he sees several wyvern pulling this big black stone tower, and Aedion immediately knows it's a witch tower because Manon had explained what they were to everyone and told them that they if they see a witch tower they need to GTFO, okay, because that is going to be bad news bears for everyone, because the witch tower will amplify this witch's power. There's nowhere to hide. They're on a big open field. They can't even duck into divots in the snow. Divots? I don't know, some crevasses. There's no crevasses for them to hide into, no trees for them to hide behind, because essentially a giant bomb's about to go off, and there's nothing they can do, and so Aedion just tells his men to run. There's a witch atop the tower that is going to make the yielding, and then that yielding is going to be amplified over the whole field. Yikes. But we won't see how that goes because we have to cut back to Anielle. It is the end of the night. They're recapping what has happened so far that day because, again, at nighttime, the battling stops because it is too dark outside to continue. And so the battling has, ceased for the day, and Aelin and Yrene have been, flown down on a rook down to Hussar's war tent to have a little meeting to meet up with Hussar and, Sartak and everyone. Everyone's gonna chat and see, about how today went and make a game plan for the next day. And as they're about to start this meeting, who should stroll in the door? But Aelin, Mother Effin, Galathinius, fire-breathing queen of Terrasen, our beloved. She strolls in and is like, hi, I heard you guys needed some help. Kayla's like, oh my gosh, I thought you guys were in Terrasen. And he starts walking towards Aelin, and Aelin immediately starts crying. Because remember the last time she saw Chaol was in Queen of Shadows right after he had shattered his spine, and he was in such a bad place mentally and also physically, to see him just walking towards her is just oh, it gets her. And I am also crying, one because of this, but also because I know it is about to come. And oh my gosh, if you haven't followed along on this series, which I imagine you would, it would be weird if you just got to this video and you hadn't watched any of the other ones. But I love that journey for you if that's you. My favorite thing, maybe my second favorite thing. My favorite thing in this series might be the Chaol and Dorian friendship. My second favorite thing is Yrene Towers and the Assassin's Blade to Tower of Dawn little journey we go on. I love it so much. To me, perfectly is the thesis statement of the Throne of Glass series. Anyway, and so we get to see them meeting again, and they're these new versions of themselves, right? We have Aelin who has stepped in. When the last time Yrene saw Aelin, she was this assassin, this brutally beaten assassin. And the last time Aelin saw Yrene, she was this waitress with this dream of being a healer. And now they are both just these spectacular forces, and they're gonna finally meet again. And they're both connected by Chaol, and I just love it so much. Anyway, Aelin doesn't know about that yet. We'll deal with that in a second. Aelin is crying, sobbing, and she says to Chaol, who's walking towards her, I knew you would do it. I knew you could. And Chaol says, I'm not alone. Guys, happy tears only. I love this so much. Chaol swallowed, releasing Aelin to extend an arm behind him to the woman he knew stood there, hand over the locket at her neck. Perhaps Aelin would not remember. Perhaps their encounter years ago had meant nothing at all to her. But Chaol drew Yrene forward. Aelin, allow me to introduce. And Aelin cuts in before Chaol can finish. Yrene Towers, the queen breathed as his wife stepped to his side. Irene's mouth quivered as she opened the silver locket and pulled out a piece of paper, hands trembling. She extended it to the queen. Aelin's own hands shook as she accepted the scrap. Thank you, Yrene whispered. Chaol supposed that it was all that really needed to be said. Aelin unfolded the paper, reading the note she had written, seeing the lines from the hundreds of foldings and rereadings these past few years. Yrene explains. I went to the tour. Yrene said, her voice cracking. I took the money you gave me and I went to the tour and I became the heir apparent to the healer on high. And now I have come back to do what I can. I taught every healer I could the lessons you showed me that night about self-defense. I didn't waste it. Not a coin you gave me or a moment of time of the life you bought me. Tears were rolling down Irene's face. Also mine. I'm a mess. Tears were rolling down Irene's face. I didn't waste any of it. Aelin closed her eyes, smiling through her own tears, and when she opened them, she took Irene's shaking hands. Now it is my turn to thank you, Aelin says. But then Aelin's gaze fell upon the wedding band on Irene's fingers, and when she glanced to Chaol, he grinned. No longer Yrene Towers, Chaol said softly, but Yrene Westfall. Aelin let out one of those choked, joyous laughs, and Rowan stepped up to her side, Irene's head tilted back to take in the warrior's full height, her eyes widening, not only at Rowan's eyes, but at the pointed ears, the slightly elongated canines and tattoos. Aelin said, then let me introduce you, Lady Westfall, to my own husband, Prince Rowan Whitethorn Galathinius, my mate. I'm back, better than ever. I did have to leave for a second and go gather myself because this moment is important to me. I just also feel like Aelin really needed this moment. Like, I feel like Aelin obviously has been having like a really difficult time transitioning back into life after spending 2 months being tortured. She like needs these reminders that in the face of tremendous unspeakable darkness and evil, like there are still these moments of joy and these moments of life, and that like there's beauty left in this world and there is hope and there are things worth fighting for and hoping for. I just love it so much. I just love it. It warms every corner of my heart. It is my favorite thing on this planet. So there we go. Anyway, Yrene bows to Rowan and Aelin is like, no, don't do that. He doesn't need that. None of that. And then she says, can I keep this? Aelin asks if she can keep the little slip of paper that Yrene has been carrying with her for years at this point. And Yrene says, it is yours, as it always was, a piece of your bravery that helped me find my own. Aelin shook her head as if to dismiss the claim, but Yrene squeezed Aelin's closed hand. It gave me courage. The words you wrote, every mile I traveled, every long hour I studied and worked, it gave me courage, and I thank you for that too. And Chaol's like, also, we do have to thank Nezran in the back, come on out, Nezran, for bringing the Southern Continent here. She was actually like a much better diplomat than I was. I was actually really too busy meeting my wife to do too much diplomacy, but Nezran is actually probably gonna get married to Sartak now, so thanks to all of them. And Aelin is like, I want to hear the whole story. I want to hear every single word, every single detail. I want to read Tower of Dawn. And you know what? I'm going to send it to her. I'm going to find Aelin Galathinius' address and I will mail her a copy. I'll send her the videos. She can just watch the videos, her and Rowan. It'll be fun for them. And then Chaol's like, where's Dorian? Where's my bestie bro, my beloved? And Aelin is like, he is not with us. He is hunting for something really important. And Chaol's like, oh, got it. And then Nezran takes the initiative to kind of introduce everyone. She introduces like Hussar and Sartak, and then Aelin introduces the crew that is with her. And when Aelin introduces Gavriel, she says, Gavriel is actually Aedion's father. And Gavriel says, Aedion is my pride, which is just like so sweet. It does warm my heart. Even though I think if Gavriel knew what Aedion was up to, he maybe wouldn't be saying that. You know, Aedion was really busy throwing girls out into the snow naked. Maybe he would be less inclined to say that. But for now, it is sweet. We love it. And Chaol's like, wow, it seems like you really have a tale to tell. And Aelin says, indeed I do. And Rowan like puts a hand on her back because she's clearly a little rattled just even by saying that. And in that moment, Chaol notices her lack of scars. He had already noticed her hair is like super long. Again, her hair must have been like bob length and is now like mermaid length. Because these guys have not seen each other for like 6 months. And he's like, wow, your hair is super long. I've like cut my hair like 6 inches and people haven't noticed. And I've seen them like one day and then the next day. So like this is impressive to me. Like it must be a substantial difference. Anyway, Chaol notices her lack of scars and Aelin sees him kind of like taking that in, and she says later, like, I'll tell you what happens. Well, now that's over and done with, Aelin announced. She strode to the small desk and map. Shall we discuss where you all plan to march once we beat the living shit out of this army? And we get a little flashback. Essentially what had happened on that running path with Aelin and Fenris was Rowan had come down and then pointed at a rook in the sky. Rowan had been talking with the captain of the ship, kind of like making plans for like when they were going to leave port again to head up to Terrasen, when this rook had flown past, and it was a scout from an armada in the south that had been kind of sent to like scope things out, and they learned from that Anielle is under siege, and Aelin had decided that they would go to Anielle to help Anielle and help the Southern Continent's army, then march with the Crochans' army up to Terrasen. So that's why they're here. While she's explaining that, who should stroll in but two more people, Bort and Falcon, stroll in, and Nezrin tries to introduce them, but Falcon immediately says, "Oh my gosh, I know you," to Aelin. "You are that assassin from that market in Xandria." Aelin arched a brow. "Hopefully the horse I stole didn't belong to you." She doesn't immediately place Falcon, because he looks quite different. And then Bort explains that Falcon got his years back. The spider that stole her years is dead because Dorian killed it. Oh my gosh, it's all connected. All connected. His gray eyes found Aelin's again. "I gave you a piece of spider silk," he explained. For a heartbeat, the then and the now blended and wobbled. "The merchant," Aelin murmured. She'd last seen him in the Red Desert, looking 20 years older. "You sold your youth to a Stygian spider." "You two knew each other?" Nezrin gaped. "Yeah, obviously. Everybody's connected, Nezrin." "The threads of fate weave together in strange ways," Falcon said, and then smiled at Aelin. Falcon says to Aelin, "I never got your name, like I just knew you as the assassin." Hussar chuckled from the other side of the desk. "You already know it, Shifter." Before Falcon can figure out what's going on, Fenris steps forward and is like, "Shifter?" And Nezrin's like, "Yeah, that's Lysandra's uncle." And everyone in the tent is like, "Oh my god, this is crazy." Aelin slumped into the chair beside Kale. Rowan laid a hand on her shoulder, and when she looked up, she found him near laughter. "What's so funny exactly?" she hissed. Rowan smirked. "That for once, you were the one who gets knocked on your ass by surprise." Aelin stuck out her tongue. Bort grinned, and Aelin winked at the girl, but Falcon said to Aelin and her companions, "You know my niece. You know that Sarah was just like kicking her little legs, having the time of her life when she wrote this. Like, you know it. This is like so fun. This is so giggly. In a book that is like so dark, to have all these like little like silly goofy little coincidences of magic of everyone knowing each other is a delight. We needed it." Bort is like so fascinated by the Fae, and particularly by like Rowan, but also by like Gabrielle and Fenris and Lorcan, and she's just like examining them. And then she turns to Aelin. "You are Aelin Galathinius. You look just how Nezrin said." Aelin grinned at Nezrin, the woman leaning against Sartak's side. Oh, they're leaning against each other, sweet. "I hope you only said horrible things about me." "Only the worst," Nezrin said with dead flatness, though her mouth twitched. And then Falcon bows and is like, "Oh my gosh, you're the literal queen of Terrasen. You like stole horses from the Lord of Xandria back in the day. That's what happened." And Aelin is like, yes, Aelin said, waving a hand. "It's a long story, and we're in the middle of a war council, so." And then Nezrin explains that Falcon is like a spy, is their spy, essentially. He like goes in and like spies on Erewhon's troops and like gathers information for them. And Aelin is like, "I guess you didn't need me to kill that spider after all." And Nezrin is like, "Oh, by the way, just so you know, like the spiders are actually Valg, so crazy." And Rowan is like, "Okay, what does that mean for the war, that the spiders are actually Valg?" And he's like running his like hand over Aelin's, because Aelin is now tensing up, because conversation on the Valg and kind of like how this war is going to need to end is no longer a giggly fun time for Miss Aelin. She was having a giggly fun time being like, "Oh my gosh, all of you guys were in Assassin's Blade." And Lorcan says, "Will they join Erewhon's forces is the better question." "They do not answer to Erewhon," Nezrin said quietly, and Aelin knew from the look that Kale gave her, the sympathy and the fear, knew in her bones before Nezrin even finished. The Stygian spiders, the Karankui, answer to their Valg queen. The only Valg queen, to Maeve. We obviously already knew that, because that was a revelation that we came to in Tower of Dawn. But there are some girlies that skipped Tower of Dawn. Embarrassing for them. And they, I bet, were knocked on their booties when they found out that Maeve was Valg. And Nezrin kind of like tells the whole story. She tells the story of like the three Valg kings and how they came to like get Maeve, and then explains that the healers can like get rid of the Valg, that like the healers from the Southern Continent have been training to get rid of the Valg. They're like this like parasitic force, and they're able to like get rid of them. And Aelin is like, "Oh my gosh, I actually suspected this. Like one time I cut her and she bled black. And then she ends up explaining to Chaol that she was like captured and held for 2 months with Maeve, just kind of like very surface level explanation, which is why she like actually isn't in Terrasen, because they like had to rescue her, and so they happened to be on the coast when the message came through. And they're trying to figure out whether like what does this mean about like the larger war? Like, is Maeve going to ally with the Valg, because it seems like she's kind of in opposition to them, but also like doesn't want to ally with like Aelin. And so, like, what is her deal? Like, what is she going to do moving forward? Alida's like, for sure, this is something we need to consider in the larger battle, but we also do need to figure out what we're doing tomorrow. And I love that Alida's like, hey, girlies, she's in a room full of, like, royals and fae and, like, is, like, so far out of her depths, but she's also like, hey, guys, I do think we actually need to prioritize a plan for tomorrow rather than trying to, like, figure out everything that's happening with the larger war, since tomorrow will be here, you know, in a few hours. And we love the responsible queen. And Chaol's like, okay, before we do that, real quick, I just want to let you know that we did bring a whole trunk of books from the southern continent that are, like, written in word marks, and no one down there could read them. We brought them to you with hopes that there would be something useful in them. Seemed like they might be helpful. And Aelin is like, great. We also love a little research strip, so we will be looking at that at some point. They make a plan for the battle for the next day, and Aelin kind of like silently stands by, and then as soon as they're done, she like flees the tent, and she's like walking around out on this field where near the lake where the Rookyn are staying. No embers trailed her. Mud did not hiss beneath her boots. There was no fire at all, not a spark, as if Maeve had snuffed out that flame, made her fear it, hate it. Aelin heads over to the creek and like kneels down to drink, and she says to Rowan, who has followed her, I can't do this. I can't. And Rowan is like, you do not face this alone. And Aelin says, I barely stood a chance against Erewhon, but Maeve too. I should have gone to Keys first. Like, I should have taken care of that. Like, to be fighting this war essentially on two fronts is too much for us to handle. And Rowan is like, Dorian has got the keys. He's got that under control for now. And Aelin is like, no, but that is my task. Like, Dorian can't do it. Like, it's mine. It has always been mine. And Rowan is like, okay, well, right now we are here. And it was the right decision to come here. Like, we need the Khoghan's army. And so we will fight. And we will convince them that they need to come with us to Terrasen. And because back in the tent, there was conversations around like, oh, what are you guys going to do next? And it was like unclear. The Khoghan's army was unwilling, mostly because Hussar's in charge, and Hussar's a little stinkerhead. It was unclear if they were going to be willing to just follow Aelin's troops to help in Terrasen, or if they were going to go elsewhere and help someone else on the continent. Like, they're here to fight the Valg, but how they choose to do so is at their discretion, and they haven't decided if Terrasen is the place that is most in need of their assistance at this point. And then Aelin says, I cannot win against them. Against a Valg king and queen, her voice turned to a rasp. They have already won. They have not. And though Rowan hated each word, he growled, and you survived 2 months against Maeve with no magic to protect you. 2 months of a Valg queen trying to break into your head, Aelin. To break you. Aelin shook. She did, though. I wanted to die by the end, before she had ever threatened me with a collar. And even now, I feel like someone has ripped me from myself, like I am at the bottom of a sea. And who I am, who I was, is far up at the surface. I will never get back there again. He didn't know what to say, what to do other than to gently pull her fingers from her palms. Did you buy the swagger, the arrogance? She demanded, voice breaking. Did the others? Because I've been trying to. I've been trying like hell to convince myself that it's real, reminding myself that I only need to pretend to be how I was just long enough to forge the lock and die. He said softly, I know, Aelin. He hadn't bought the winks and smirks for a heartbeat. I can't feel myself anymore. It's like she snuffed it out, ripped me from it. She and Karn and everything they did to me. She gulped down air, and Rowan wrapped her in his arms and pulled her into his lap. I'm so tired, she wept. I am so tired, Rowan. I know. He stroked her hair. I know. It was all there really was to say. Rowan held her until her weeping eased and she lay still, nestled against his chest. I don't know what to do, she whispered. You fight, he said simply. We fight until we can't anymore. We fight. Rowan laid a hand on her chest, right over that burning heart, fire heart. A challenge and a summons. She placed her hand atop his, warm despite the frigid night, as if that fire had not yet gone out entirely, but she only gazed up at the stars, to the Lord of the North, standing watch. We fight, she breathed. And then Aelin goes over to Fenris, who is, like, outside, and she's like, hey, Fenris, like, I'm here if you ever need to talk about it. Like, I think, the realization that Maeve is Valg has, like, really weighed particularly heavy on, like, the cadre with, Fenris and Rowan and Lorcan, because they spent decades, centuries of their lives pledged to this woman, and obviously all of them at this point know she's an evil woman, but to know that she is like Valg, I think it like it does alter things, and Aelin is, you know, wants to check in on her buddy Fenris, and she's like, hey, like, I am here to talk about it whenever you need. And Fenris is like, thank you. Rowan and Gabrielle are also having like a little chat about the realization that May was Valg, and they served her and they didn't even know, and Gabrielle is like, well, you know, at the end of the day, like, this really changes nothing, like, we knew she was an evil lady. And Rowan is like, yes, but this also means that we will likely, like, be put directly in battle with Maeve. Like, it's not just like, oh, Maeve is gonna be like a nuisance, but like Maeve will probably enter into this war in like a very real way. Will you be able to live with killing your own people? And Gabrielle's like, what about you? Will you be able to? Rowan doesn't answer. And then Gabrielle asks, why didn't Aelin offer me the blood oath? She was offering everyone on that ship the blood oath, but not me. And Rowan says, Aedion. I added this part. I don't suspect this was in there originally. My note says, Aedion, the man baby, will get upset if you get it before him. Which is true. Aedion, the man baby, will get upset if his dad does get it before him. That's the only reason why. Gabrielle says, I would have said yes if she had offered. And Rowan goes, I know. She knows too. Gabrielle says, do you think it's bad that we haven't heard anything from Terrasen? And Rowan's like, no, they're probably like chilling. We would have heard if something like really bad had happened. And then he says, we must convince the Calgonate royals to march northward when this battle is over. Gabrielle swore softly. Rowan nodded. If we can smash this army tomorrow and convince the royals that Terrasen is the only course of action, then we indeed could be headed north soon. You might be fighting at Aedion's side by Yulmus. Gabrielle's hands clenched at his side, tattoos spreading over his knuckles. If he will allow me that honor. Lorcan is also outside. Lorcan, he's like brooding in a corner probably. I don't know. I don't think Lorcan does anything but brood. Like, he's brooding or pining. Brooding or pining. Those are the only two things Lorcan does. He broods and he pines over Elide. Okay? I think he's in the brooding state. When Elide comes over to him and he's like, hey, we're like going back to the keep. The rooks are gonna like take us back there now. So like, let's go. And Lorcan is like, hey, I didn't know she was Valg. I swear I didn't know. And Elide's like, okay. Do you like want a cookie for that? Like a trophy? Like, we assumed you didn't know. Like, it would have been kind of rude if you knew and didn't tell us. It doesn't change anything. And Lorcan is like, I just thought she was like immortal and kind of like a cold lady. I just kind of thought she was mean, you know? And Elide is like, I do not know why you are so shocked. Like, she was literally so evil. And you loved her anyway. And Lorcan says, I didn't love her. And Elide's like, okay, well, you acted like you did. Lorcan snarls, why is that the point you keep returning to, Elide? Why is that the one thing you cannot let go of? And Elide says, because I am trying to understand how you could come to love a monster. Why? Lorcan asks. Because it will help me to understand how I did the same. Lorcan goes, Elide. No. I don't care that you took the blood oath to Aelin. Also, you're immortal and I'm human, so regardless of whether you are a monster or not, which you are, by the way, this is a bad idea. Because my lifespan is this, and your lifespan is this, you know? And Lorcan is like, okay, you're just jealous. And Elide is like, jealous? Jealous of what? That demon you served? The only thing I am jealous of, Lorcan, is that she is rid of you. And Lorcan goes, I'm sorry, but Elide's face did not warm. I don't care, she said, turning on her heel. And I don't care if you walk off that battlefield tomorrow. And then she walks away. And Elide, that was not nice, okay? We could have left off that last line. Okay, we could have said, I don't care. We also probably didn't need to say the only thing I'm jealous of Maeve of is the fact that she is rid of you. Although that is a good line. Good line to the tiny lady. But this was a little excessively mean. Which is what Gabrielle immediately says to Elide. He like watched that whole thing unfold and he was like, Elide, that was kind of not very nice, okay? Like, Lorcan is already having like a pretty rough day. Like, finding out the woman that he was like lusting over, finding out the woman he like served for centuries is an evil Valg lady was like kind of rough already. And also, I've never heard Lorcan apologize for anything in his entire life. Even when Maeve whipped him for a mistake, like, he did not apologize to her. And Elide's like, so I am supposed to just forgive him. That should earn my forgiveness. And Gabrielle's like, no. But you have to realize that he swore that blood oath to Aelin for you, no one else, so he could remain near you, even knowing well enough that you will have a mortal lifespan. And Elide doesn't respond because she knows this. She's known that from the moment she saw him take that blood oath. She knows it is about her. That's why she's being so mean to him tonight, because she's like, she can't let him worm his way back into her heart. And she goes to tell Gabrielle that, like, whatever, she doesn't care, but like, he's already left. He doesn't have time for this girlie and her drama. Meanwhile, Nezran, Bort, and Bort's fiance Yrene are watching the rooks carrying everyone back to the keep. And Bort is like, I wish I could go with them. I want to go fight with the Fae. I'm like kind of tired of fighting with the Rookin. boring. And Nezrin gives her an amused sidelong glance. You'll get that opportunity soon enough if we march to Terrasen after this. And Yrene says, a fine commander you are, mooning after the Fae like a doe-eyed girl. And then they like bicker back and forth, and it's like this very cute little moment between Bort and Yrene where they talk about their wedding that's coming up when they get back, and they're just like cute. And it's clear that they like love each other in this very like teasing sort of way. And we love it. Then Sartaq comes over to Nezrin, and he like comments on what's happening between Yrene and Bort, and he says to Nezrin, war does strange things to people, makes everything more urgent. He ran a hand down the back of her head, his fingers twining in her hair before he murmured in her ear, come to bed. Heat flared through her body. We've a battle to launch tomorrow, again. And a day of death has made me want to hold you, the prince said, giving her that disarming grin she had no defenses against, especially, as he added, and do other things to you. Cute! This is not important to the plot, but I felt like everyone deserved a little Sartaq and Nezrin moment. And it's precious. Okay, we're going to take a quick interlude to check in with the witches back at the Crochan camp. They have met them back up with them after spending some time in the Ferian Gap. And they land, and Bronwyn is immediately like, okay, what happened? Give us the update. And Manon was like, I asked them to consider their position in this war. And Bronwyn is like, and they said... And Manon's like, I don't know, we'll see. And Bronwyn is like, no. You said you were going to the Ferian Gap to, like, summon the Ironteeth witches, not to like ask them if they wanted to come hang out with us. And Manon says, I went to make them contemplate who they wish to be. And Bronwyn's like, okay, so will they fight or will they turn on Morath and the other Ironteeth? Like, what's going to happen? And Manon's like, I don't know. She didn't. She truly didn't. And Manon instead goes over to Glenys and she says, do you think the Ironteeth are capable of change? And Glenys is like, you know the Ironteeth better than me. Like, you would be more aware of that than I would. And Manon says, well, did Rhiannon think we could be? Did she think I could be? And Glenys said, she believed in a better future for our peoples. She died for that dream, the possibility of a future, and Manon had killed her for it. And Glenys says, so... did Rhiannon think the Ironteeth capable of change? She might have been the only witch in the Crochans who did, but she did believe, with every shred of her being, her sagging throat bobbed. She believed you two could rule it together, the Witch Kingdom. You would lead the Ironteeth and she would the Crochans, and together you would rebuild what fractured long ago. And then Manon says, and now there is just me. Now it is just you. Glenys stared, turned direct, unforgiving. A bridge between us. And then Astrid says, the Ironteeth will turn, you will see. They'll turn, I swear. Glenys offered a small smile, but Manon said nothing as she dug into her food. Hope, she had told Elide all those months ago. But perhaps there would be none from them after all. Anyway, Dorian's back in the corner having an existential crisis about how he needs to end things. And, okay. Like, leave him alone. Let him go have an existential crisis. And he's, like, practicing turning into a crow. Sometimes you just, like, need to let Dorian have, like, an angsty moment in the corner. And that's what he's doing right now. We'll see him later. Lysandra wakes up in this medical tent and her leg is like burning. It hurts so badly, but she's like awake, and Aedion is sitting right there. And Aedion says to her, we yielded Perranth. We've been on the run for 2 days now. Another 3 days and we'll reach Orinth. I just want to take a second to like, hello, this girl just woke up. She's been out for 2 full days. She was viciously attacked, and we couldn't even say like, hello, good morning, how are you feeling? Sorry for throwing you into the snow. You're gonna be okay. Like, we fixed you right up. Kisses on the forehead. I love you. Peace out. Like, why are we starting with bad news only? You could have said hi first, is all I'm saying. I understand that this is wartime, so like manners are of utmost importance, but she was on her deathbed, so like maybe we could say hi first. And then Aedion goes on. You rallied our army. We lost the battle, but they didn't run in shame. He did forget to say thank you, which is kind of weird, but I'll say it for him. Thank you, Lysandra. Aedion Asherver. The thing is, I want to be on Aedion's team. Okay? I do want to be on Aedion's team, but I'm going to need him to start groveling a little bit harder. I'm going to need him to start groveling a little bit harder. And then Lysandra looks down at her hand and she realizes she's back in like her like Lysandra form. And Aedion's like, yeah, everyone did see you shift back into Lysandra, but it's cool. We told them Aelin is on like a super secret mission with Rowan. But yeah, the jig is up. They do know you are not Aelin. So, and Lysandra's like, I'm sorry. And I want to say, like, girlie, don't apologize. You did more than anyone could ever ask you to do. So, like, no one should be saying sorry. Aedion does say, I'm sorry. Good boy. When I saw the Ilkin, when I saw you against them, Aedion, and he cuts himself off. He's, like, so distraught with, like, the thought of seeing her being torn apart by the Ilkin. And I need Aedion to take a moment. I need him to close his eyes and take a deep breath. And remember how he feels in this moment and make sure that it doesn't happen again. It doesn't feel nice, my love. I know you are capable of better, okay? We've seen you be better. We know you are capable of better, but I'm gonna need you to stop being just like a complete and total little dickhead when someone does something without like consulting with you first. Like, you can be frustrated, you can be mad, but you can't do this. You can't throw women naked into the snow. You can't call them useless. You can't be so mean to them and refuse to speak to them. Like, we need to have some like better communication and coping skills, okay? My sweet boy, because it feels bad every time when then something happens to these girls in your life, these women. First with Aelin and now with Lysandra, who then, you know, continue to sacrifice themselves because they are good, honorable people, which is something that you and I both know. When something happens to them, you feel bad. And I don't want you to feel bad. So let's look inward, remember this moment, reflect on it, and make a change. You did this, he said, voice lowering, for Terrasen. For Aelin, you were willing to die for it, gods above. I was. Her words came out cold as steel. I have been degraded and humiliated in so many ways for so many years, but I have never felt as humiliated as when you threw me in the snow. When you called me a lying bitch in front of our friends and allies, never. She hated the angry tears that stung her eyes. I was once forced to crawl before men. And gods above, I nearly crawled for you for these months. And yet it takes me nearly dying for you to realize that you've been an ass. It takes me nearly dying for you to see me as human again. Lysandra put a hand on her chest, right over her own shredded heart. I wanted it to be you, she said. After Wesley, after all of it, I wanted it to be you. What Aelin asked me to do had no bearing on that. What she asked me to do never felt like a burden because I wanted it to be you in the end anyways. She didn't wipe away the tears that slipped down her cheeks, and you threw me into the snow. Aedion slid to his knees, reached for her hands. I will never stop regretting it, Lysandra. I will never forget a second of it. I will never stop hating myself for it. And I am so... Don't... She snatched her hand back. Don't kneel. Don't bother. She pointed to the tent flap. There is nothing I have left to say to you, or you to me. For a few breaths, he just stared down at her. Then he said, I meant every promise I made to you on that beach in Skulls Bay. And then he was gone. Good! Rip that made a new one, Lysandra. Aedion... Like, no. What you said in Skulls Bay does not matter at this point. Like, this has really become a pattern. Like, what happens the next time she does something you don't like? And, like, I'm not saying that, like, Lysandra and Aelin were, like, completely in the right. I'm just saying that this was, like, a massive overreaction and he had no right to act the way he did. That Lysandra apologized for the wrongs and, like, tried to move forward in, like, a healthy, productive way. And Aedion just turned into a, like, literal monster. And I do think that it did not make sense for Lysandra to accept that apology because he has done nothing to show that if something like that were to happen again, that he wouldn't just do the same thing. Like, she deserves better than that. You know that, and she knows that. So if you want Lysandra, you better show up for her. You better show her with your actions that you are better, and beyond that, that you are going to consistently be so. Anyway, Aedion is really sad now because his actions had consequences, and Lysandra has, like, we find out that Lysandra was barely able to be healed. Like, she literally almost died. And Aedion is walking back to his tent when Darrow appears next to Ren. And Darrow is just like a menace. Darrow's out here just being like, Aedion. I think that's probably how he sounds. Aedion, you've been stripped of your rank as general for your acts of rebellion and your defeat at Perranth. And if your imposter pretends to be Aelin again, I'll sign her execution order. I don't know why I decided to put on a voice this time, but I kind of feel like he has a very nasally, cranky voice. Darrow just shows up to be a bad time. And Aedion says to this in response to the execution order, I'd like to see you try. Darrow says, I'd like to see you try to stop us. And Aedion says, oh, no, you're confused. It's not me who you'll be dealing with. Lysandra is an incredibly talented, powerful shifter, so good luck to you, to anyone who tries to harm her. And Darrow says, the sword of Orinth, if you will. Like, he's like, okay, whatever. Give us the sword of Orinth. And Aedion is like, no, that belongs to me by rights, LOL. And Darrow's like, no, that sword belongs to a true general of Terrasen, to its prince commander. As you are no longer bearer of that title, the sword shall return to Orinth until a new, appropriate bearer can be determined. Ren growled, that sword is in our possession, Darrow, because of Aedion. Had he not won it back, it would still be rusting in Ardalane's trove. And Darrow says, he will always have our gratitude for that. Thanks for getting our treasure back, but, like, it's not yours anymore. And Aedion just, like, takes the sword off and throws it on the ground. And Darrow is like, okay, now you report to Killian. Killian is the boss man in charge. You are just a general soldiers. And Aedion's like, okay. And Ren is like, why are you not fighting him on this? And Aedion is like, I don't even care about this anymore. Lysandra is being mean to me. I apologized and she didn't even accept it. So now I'm in a bad mood. What a whiny baby. Word travels, like, pretty fast that Aedion is no longer the general, and after that, the defeat in Perranth and learning that Aelin isn't really with them, and now learning that Aedion is no longer going to be their general, the vibes at camp are you know, generally terrible. The morale is low. Killian, the new commander, refuses to make any decisions without Aedion. He worked directly under Aedion, knows that Aedion is actually like quite good at war, despite what we've seen. We're told that he's good at this. Lysandra is still ignoring him. Lysandra like still won't talk to him. Good. But they have to make a decision about what to do next, whether they need to go through the mountains or cross back over the river to get to Perranth. And if they can cross back over the river, it's a little bit faster, but if the river isn't frozen, then they're like out of luck. So they send Lysandra to fly ahead. The river is not frozen, and Perranth is closing in, and it's too close to head north to the mountains, so they are like trapped. Perranth is going to get them, essentially. They do not have enough time to make it to Perranth through the mountains, and the river is not frozen, so they can't go that way. Back in Anielle, Chaol is up on the battlements. It's even, I don't know if it's the same night or the next day, but I think it's that night. Chaol's up on the battlements, and he is feeding Butterfly, his mean horse that he got from the southern continent. Because the horse is stressed, they flew her up there on a rook, and so she's a little bit stressed out, and she's also like a firecracker, as you remember. She is lovingly referred to by Chaol as Helios's horse because she's like a little hell beast. And so Chaol's trying to like calm her down and feed her snacks, and Yrene comes up, and Yrene is like, hey, can someone else do that for you? And like, it seems like you kind of have like a lot to do, and it might be good to like rest rather than like feed this random horse. And Chaol is like, she doesn't know what is happening. I'd like to try to calm her before she like goes to bed. I love that he's like, I gotta take care of my horse, Scarly. And Yrene is like, okay, well, I need to go. And Chaol is like, hey, I know. And then he just touches her on the belly. And Yrene is like, how? And Chaol's like, it's true then. And Yrene says, do you want it to be? And Chaol says, more than I realized. And Yrene asked if she's mad that she didn't tell him sooner because she's nearly 2 months pregnant. And Chaol is like, no, although I wished you would have told me, but I understand that you didn't want me to worry. And Aedion Ash River, I'm going to send this scene to you as just a note. So see how Chaol didn't like the choice that Yrene made, but he understood that maybe it wasn't about him. What if everything is not about you, you know? And he said, I respect that, and maybe in the future we can make a different choice, but I understand. And then Yrene says to Chaol, you'll be a brilliant father, she said softly. The most brilliant one to ever exist. High praise indeed, coming from a woman who wanted to toss me from the high window of the Tor a few months ago. A healer would never be so unprofessional, Yrene continues. Yrene says, I'm happier than I can express, Yrene, to share with you. Anything you need, I am yours to command. I'm sorry, this is adorable. It's adorable. It warms my heart. And he's like, but for now I do need to go intercept Aelin before she meets my father. I like need to orchestrate that meeting. I cannot imagine it's going to go well. And Yrene is like, me neither. I'm going to come with you, and I'm going to bring snacks because I do want to watch. Chaol barely intercepts his father before he finds Aelin. Like, he's standing outside of Aelin's room. Yrene, on their walk down, notices that Chaol is limping really badly, which means he, like, worked himself too hard because it is not a result of, like, her magic. She's really fairly well rested for the day. And so Chaol must have, like, injured himself battling. And so she's like, I'm gonna have to deal with that later. Also, I like mentioned it earlier, but she's like worried that his chair might have gotten crushed in some of the attacks today, and so she's gonna have to go find that for him and make sure that it's like safe and ready for him to use. And then Daddy Westfall says, why didn't you wake me when the Queen of Terrasen arrived? And Chaol was like, waking you was not really a priority. But he goes ahead and he brings him to Aelin, and it's just Rowan, Aelin, and Elide in the room. I'm pretty sure. That's what I have in my notes. I don't know where everyone else is. And Chaol's like, hey, girly, my dad wants to talk to you. And then Daddy Westfall comes in, and Aelin's like, anyway, don't waste your breath on taunts. I'm tired and hungry, and it won't end well for you. Like, I just want to go to bed, dude. And Daddy Westfall is like, this is my keep. Aelin made a good show at gaping at the ceiling, the walls. Is it really? And it comes out that Chaol is hand to the king. Like, he had never mentioned that to his father. It just, like, didn't come up. And Chaol, like, honestly, no longer seeking his father's approval in any capacity. And so he just, like, didn't mention it. And his dad is, like, being so cranky and so rude. And Aelin is like, okay, great. On that parting note, we're going to finish up our dinners. Enjoy your evening. We will see you on the battlements tomorrow. And please do rot in hell. Aelin turns around one last time, and she threw a grin over her shoulder to Yrene and Chaol and said with eyes bright with joy and warmth this time, congratulations. Aelin and Rowan, obviously, with their fae senses, can smell that Yrene is pregnant. And Aelin is, like, so happy for Chaol. Then they leave. Everyone goes to bed, and it's just Rowan, Aelin, and Elide in this room. And Elide is like, what a horrible man that is. I, like, feel bad for Chaol. And Aelin is like, I feel bad for anyone who wants to interact with him. He's literally the worst. Rowan rolled his eyes but smiled, just as Aelin had seen him smile when they both scented what was on Yrene, the child in her. She was happy for Yrene, for both of them. Chaol deserved that joy, perhaps more than anyone, as much as her own mate. Aelin is like so annoyed that where they've been placed placed in like literally an empty room that has like sleeping bags. They're like sleeping bags on the floor. And Aelin is like, I am a queen. Aelin does kind, generous, strong, powerful, tough. She likes a life of luxury, okay? She wants the finer things in life, and she doesn't want to sleep in a sleeping bag. But she's laying on the floor next to Rowan, and Rowan is talking to her, and he's like, the men are terrified. They do not trust our allies to save them. It is going to make for sloppy fighters tomorrow. And Aelin is like, okay, how do we amend that situation? What do we do? And Rowan is like, I don't know. And Aelin is like, okay, great. I will come up with something. Thank you for bringing up a problem. Don't worry, I will scheme while I'm sleeping and figure it out. But overall, like, the plans for tomorrow seem like pretty solid, and everyone seems like ready for what tomorrow brings. And Elide is like, so I was actually wondering, now that we're all here, if we get rid of all the Valg, that would include Maeve, who will rule Doranelle? And Fenris is like, well, we will be getting rid of Maeve. We will be burning that bitch alive, so don't even worry. And Rowan is like, oh, Aelin actually is heir to the crown and Doranelle, so Aelin will also be in charge of Doranelle. And Aelin is like, I will literally never go back in Doranelle as long as I live. I'm never going back on that island. Rowan's cousin Celine can have it. And Gabrielle's like, oh, interesting, so you will be the fairy queen of the West. And Aelin's like, whatever, what's another fancy title, I suppose? She's like, I don't even care. Call me fairy queen of the West, fire-breathing bitch queen, whatever, I'll take it all. That night, Aelin has a nightmare where she's trapped in a wordstone coffin with Elena, and she feels like she is suffocating inside of it. And when she thinks about it, when she wakes up, she like just thinks about that feeling of being like suffocated inside of this coffin with Elena, and how at the end of the day, despite all of this, despite her like power, despite everything that she's done, she is merely a sacrifice for these gods. Back with the witches, Dorian has shifted into a girly. He does have some like serious thoughts, like mini sentences about having boobs now. And it's just like the sort of thoughts you would imagine Dorian, Prince of Flirting, would have about being a girly. You know, like he would be like, okay, I have thoughts, okay? Dorian's walking around the camp and nobody's noticing him yet. He's transformed into like one of the novice Crochans. So he's like picked a girl, and it's someone who's like a familiar face around camp, but someone who's not like super important. Manon eventually smells him and is like, I assume this means you're preparing to leave for Morath. And Dorian is like, did I say anything of the sort? Maybe I just want to walk around camp as a girl. And Manon is like, okay, we have enough to deal with today, Princeling. I don't want to play games with you. And Dorian's like, I'm not standing in your way. Manon grabs his wrist, which is even scarier than usual because he's just a frail girl and then is strong and tough and scary in general. And Manon has said, if you wanted a soft-hearted woman who will weep over hard choices and ultimately balk from them, then you are in the wrong bed. And Dorian says, I'm not in anyone's bed right now, because they haven't slept together since that day where Manon found out that Dorian was planning to go to Morath with Kaltain. No, Dorian's not going with Kaltain. Kaltain was also there that day, you know. I guess Dorian has just stolen Manon's bed this whole time, which is kind of rude. And Manon is like, I cannot have this conversation with you while you're a girl. Like, this is just, like, too weird. Can you shift back to being Dorian? Dorian thinks to himself, he honestly thought she might unsheath those iron teeth and rip out his throat. Half of him wanted her to try. He even went so far as to run one of those phantom hands along her jaw. You don't think I don't know why you don't want me to go to Morath? Dorian ran those invisible fingers down her neck, trailing them along her collarbones. Tell me to stay. Tell me to stay with you, if that's what you want. His invisible fingers grew talons and scraped over her skin. Manon's throat bobbed. But you won't say it, will you, Manon? Because you know why? Because while you might be older, might be deadlier in 1,000 different ways, deep down you're afraid. You don't know how to ask me to stay because you're afraid of admitting to yourself that you want it. You're afraid of yourself more than anyone else in the world. You're afraid. For several heartbeats, she just stared at him, and then she snarled, you don't know what you're talking about, and stalked away. Manon storms off, and she thinks to herself, afraid of admitting that she felt any sort of attachment? It was preposterous, and perhaps true. But it was not her problem. Not right now. She's like, I cannot deal with this right now. The Crochans are getting ready to leave, but the 13 aren't coming with them because they have to draw the line somewhere. They haven't been able to convince them to join with them to head to Terrasen, and so they're like, okay, well, we're not just gonna like keep following them around and hoping that they eventually join us. Like, we did our best. Hopefully they will change their minds later, but like we have to make other arrangements, other plans to garner support for us up in Terrasen. And Gladys is like, bye, we're leaving. It was so nice to meet you. And Manon says, fly well. Glennis lowered her hands from Manon's shoulder. May your path carry you safely through war and back home at last. She didn't feel like telling the crone there was no home for her, or for the 13. But then Glennis freezes up. So Glennis is about to leave, but then she looks up at the sky and is like, run now, because the Ironteeth Matrons are here. Yikes. But like fun. But yikes. The Matrons came alone. They didn't bring anyone else from the coven. And Dorian shows up, and Manon is like, do not engage. Like, leave them alone. It was like, it's not his battle, no matter what dwelt in his veins. So she's like, Dorian, you stay out of this. But Glennis comes over, and Glennis is armed. So it's Manon and Glennis. The Bluebud matron says to Glennis, it has been an age. Manon reveals that the Yellow Legs matron is currently wearing the crown of stars, which is Rhiannon's crown, the crown of the Crochans. And Grandma Blackbeak says, what company you keep these days, granddaughter? And she's got her battle braid in, like she is ready to fight. And Glennis is like, what do you want? And Grandma Blackbeak says, you made a grave error, Manon Kinslayer, when you sought to turn our forces against us, when you sowed such lies amongst our sentinels regarding our plans, my plans. And Manon says, I only spoke truth, and it must have frightened you enough to gather these two to hunt me down, to prove your innocence and scheming against them. And the Yellow Legs matron says, we came to rid ourselves of a thorn in our side. And Manon says, you came because we pose a threat. You came because you are afraid. You came because you have no power beyond what we give you, and you are scared to death that we are about to take it away. You came alone for that fear, that others might see what we are capable of, the truth that you always have sought to hide. Manon turns towards the Yellow Legs matron and says to her, that is not your crown. And the Yellow Legs matron says, come fetch it from me then, traitor. And Manon, like, barely survived her fight with her grandmother. She's not sure if she can stand against these 3 Yellow Leg matrons, even with Glennis assisting her, like 3 versus 2. And they tussle. Dorian's watching from the back, and he's so impressed with Manon. She's, like, so pretty, but also she's so good at sword fighting. And he really wants to use his magic to help, especially when Manon starts bleeding, but he refrains. Respectful, responsible. Gone was the witch who had slept and wished for death. Gone was the witch who had raged at the truth that had torn her to shreds. And in her place, fighting as if she were the very wind, unfaltering against the matrons, stood someone who Dorian had not yet met. Stood a queen of 2 peoples. The Yellow Legs matron launched an offensive that had Manon yielding a step, then another, swords rising against each slashing blow, yielding only those few steps and nothing more, because Manon, with conviction in her heart, with utter fearlessness in her eyes, was wholly unstoppable. And they almost get Miss Manon, but then she chops off the Yellow Legs matron's head. Slay. Slay. We love that for her. And Manon immediately takes the crown off of the Yellow Legs' head, and she places it on her own head. And beside Dorian, around him, the 13 touch their 2 fingers to their brow in deference. I don't know how they do it. They look this. And beside him, around him, the 13 touched 2 fingers to their brow in deference, in allegiance to the queen who stared down the remaining 2 high witches, the Crochan queen, crowned anew. The sacred fire leaped and danced as if in joyous welcome. Manon turned to the Bluebud matrons and says, go, tell your daughter, all debts between us are paid, and she may decide what to do with you. And the Bluebud pieces out, leaving only Grandmother Blackbeak. Manon was glowing, as if the stars atop her head pulsed through her body, a wondrous and mighty beauty like no other in the world, like no one had ever been or would be again, and slowly, savoring each step, Manon stalked towards her grandmother. Manon drops her sword and she shoots her iron nails out, and Manon feels like her parents are with her, on either side of her in this moment. But as she approaches her grandmother, she knows that this death is not hers. It's Astrid's. But before Astrid can come and claim it, her grandmother flees. Her grandmother's scurries the heck out of there. And Manon then takes off the crown and gives it to Glennis, and Glennis is like, oh, this doesn't belong to me. And she refuses to take it. What was stolen has been restored. What was lost has come home. I hail thee, Manon, Crochan queen of witches. Manon stood fast against the tremors that threatened to buckle her legs, stood fast as the other Crochans, Bronwyn with them, dropped to a knee. Dorian, standing amongst them, smiled brighter and freer than she had ever seen. And then the 13 knelt, 2 fingers going to their brows as they bowed their heads, fierce pride lighting their faces. Queen of witches, Crochans and Blackbeaks declared, as one voice, as one people. Our beloved queen, Manon. That's where we'll leave our witches for now. It is battle day. It's an important day. It's an important little day. It's morning. Rowan didn't sleep super well. I don't think anyone is sleeping super well in the current conditions. Lorcan never made it back to their room. They don't know what happened to him. Rowan makes a note that Aelin didn't offer up her magic in any of the solutions, any of the plans they came up with last night when they were strategizing in the tent with everyone else. And he knows that people are going to be disappointed in that. He knows that people are expecting Aelin to put on a little bit of a show in terms of just kind of wiping out people with her firepower. My note here says, okay, so no is a full sentence and she doesn't want to. She said, no, I'm not going to use my magic. full sentence. She doesn't need an explainer. But Rowan is a little bit worried about it. And then Fenris wakes up and he comes over to Rowan and he says, they burned her. And Rowan is like, what? What is going on? And Fenris is like, Cairn and Maeve, they burned her, like Aelin. And Rowan says, why are you telling me this? Rowan is kind of like, this is really not like your story to be sharing. Like, this is kind of inappropriate, like internally. And Fenris says, you were staring at her half the night. I could see it on your face. You were thinking, why doesn't she just burn the enemy to hell? And Fenris goes on to explain that they essentially like cooked her hands over open flames. And it took the healers 2 weeks to heal her, to like put her hands back in a state where they were like functional. So and then when she woke up, she didn't know what was real and what was not real. And how that process had kind of been repeated every time she was tortured. Every time she was tortured, they would completely heal her skin entirely so that Aelin was unable to distinguish between reality and nightmares. And then he says to her, you're claiming marks, though. Fenris wiped his face again. No matter what they did to her, they remained. Longer than any other of the scars, they stayed. Yet her neck has been smooth when he had found her. Reading that last thought, Fenris said, the last time they healed her, right before she escaped, that's when they vanished. When Maeve told her that you had gone to Terrasen. Rowan says, why are you telling me this? And Fenris says, so you can stop wondering what happened. Focus on something else today. Let her come to you when she is ready. She is my mate, Rowan growled. You don't think I know that? Fenris held up his hands. You can be brutal when you want something. And Rowan is like, I would never force her to tell me anything she wasn't ready to say. Like, that is offensive, Fenris. And Fenris is like, okay. I just like wanted you to have enough information where you, like, your mind wasn't just constantly turning it over. Like, sometimes it's better to, like, know a little bit. And then Fenris goes to breakfast. Elide and Aelin are already at the table. And then they start to poke around. They start to like open doors and like look at things because Aelin is a nosy girly. Like she always has been, always will be. And they discovered a locked room, which doesn't say lock for long. Rowan just goes with his magic and he unlocks it. And it's a room filled with treasure. Fun. It is like an armory of sorts, but it's not like of like weapons that they're using. It's like heirloom, beautiful, like antique weapons. And Alida's like, why didn't they distribute these weapons to everyone? And Fenris is like, this is all like clearly like treasure. This is like family heirlooms. And Alida's like, are we going to take it without even asking Kale's permission? And Aelin snickered. Let's consider ourselves swords for hire. And as such, we have fees that we need to be paid, so we'll take what we're owed for today's battle and spare his lordship the task of having to come down here himself. And then Rowan thinks to himself, gods, he loved her. Fenris winked at Elide. I won't tell if you don't, lady. Elide blushed, then waved them onward. Collect your earnings, then. And they grab some extras for Gabrielle and Lorcan. Elide says, you must charge a great deal for your services, Elide muttered, even while the lady of Perranth tied a few daggers to her own belt. I need some way to pay for my expensive taste, don't I? Aelin drawled, weighing the dagger in her hands. Elide and Aelin stay down in the armory for a minute, and Fenris and Rowan go upstairs to like begin the battling because they are gonna have a bros moment. Aelin hasn't made it back upstairs yet, and Lorcan says, someone better tell her to stop primping and come up here. Rowan snarls at him, even though, sorry, that was funny. But Rowan is also like, where the heck is Aelin? Like, she should be up here already. They are putting up the siege ladders and things are like already getting serious. Like the battle has already begun. Morath's troops are already like coming at them fast. And Kale is giving commands for them to like bring down the siege ladders and the siege towers as fast as possible. Things are bad. The men are nervous. The first siege tower connects to the battlement, but then something emerges from the archway behind all of them. It's Aelin. She's completely decked out in this beautiful stolen gold armor with a little like gold diadem, little gold war crown. There was no fear on her face, no doubt, as Aelin hefted her shield, flipping Goldrin in her hand once before the first of Morath's soldiers was upon her. And then she starts just slicing the men up. And everyone on the battlements is like, the queen has come, the queen is here, the queen is here. Everyone's so excited. The queen, the men shouted, to the queen. And as Rowan fought his way closer, as that cry went down the battlements, and Anielle men ran to her aid, he realized that Aelin did not need an ounce of flame to inspire men to follow. That she had been waiting, yanking at the bit, to show them what she, without magic, without any godly power, might do. He'd never seen such a glorious sight in every land, every battle. He had never seen anything as glorious as Aelin before the throat of the siege tower, holding the line. Dawn breaking around them, Rowan loosed a battle cry and tore into Morath. This first battle would set the tone. It would set the tone and send a message, not to Morath. Impress us, Hassar had said. So she would. So she'd picked the golden armor and her battle crown and waited until dawn, until that siege tower slammed into the battlements before unleashing herself. To keep the men here from breaking, to wipe away the fear festering in their eyes, to convince the cognate royals of what she might do, of what she could do. Not a threat, but a reminder. She was no helpless princess. She had never been. Slow clap. She had never been. She was no helpless princess. She had never been. I'm obsessed with this book. The men on the battlements are chanting her name and Chaol's name. They're chanting Aelin and Chaol, and the Fae boys are fighting, and Morath is at the gates with a battering ram, and Aelin thinks to herself how far they both were from Rifthold, from the assassin and the captain. Aelin smiled grimly. She'd bring them all down, then Erewhon. And then she'd unleash herself upon Maeve. Not helpless, not contained, never again. Death became a melody in her blood, every movement a dance as the tide of soldiers pouring from the tower slowed. What Lorcan and the lion would do upon reaching the bottom, how they'd dislodge the tower she didn't know, didn't think about it, not from this place of killing and movement, of breath and blood, of freedom. Death had been her curse and her gift and her friend for these long, long years. She was happy to greet it again under the golden morning sun. Anyway, Elide is inside helping the healers, sort of, but mostly just trying to stay out of the way. She's like pretty queasy, and if she sees like bad injuries, she like almost passes out and stuff. She already got yelled at from Aretia when she threw up when someone had their like shin bones sticking out of her leg, so mostly she's just staying out of the way, but she's like inside helping with the healers. Like, she's not a fighter, she's an inside girl. Butterfly and Chaol are up on the battlements, literally stomping on Valkfoot soldiers. Butterfly is a queen. Her real name is like Farsha, but it translates to butterfly. And I put butterfly clips in her hair because I feel like she would want them. The Valg are relentless, but being sandwiched between the Calgon's army on the ground and the Fae and the Keep, they like are going to be defeated, but they just keep coming. Chaol thinks to himself, his shield bloodied and indented, his horse a raging demon herself beneath him. Chaol kept swinging his sword. His wife lay beneath the Keep behind him. He would not fail her. I do maybe put in every time Chaol thinks to himself, his wife is inside, he's not going to fail her, because I love it. Sue me. Make your own presentation and don't include it that much. Anyway, this is kind of the battle. Nezran and Sartaq are leading the aerial legion alongside Bor and Euron. They like both have like different sides. And so she goes with Sartaq over to where Morath is taking a battering ram to the dam. They like fly down and they realize that like Morath doesn't care about its men. It does not care if its own forces were washed away. They're gonna lose. Like, this battle is a lost cause. They're like sandwiched between the Calgon's forces on one side and the castle and like the Fae warriors on the other. Like, they're going to lose. But they're not going to allow the Calgon's army to walk off this plain. They're going to do as much damage as possible to the army that is here to make sure that they cannot continue up to Terrasen to provide further support. And the Morath soldiers are like trying to shoot Sartaq and Nezran down while Nezran and Sartaq try to get rid of the battering ram. They're finally able to take the guys down with the battering ram, but they see something at the dam that makes them race back to the castle off of the battlefield. Meanwhile, Lorcan and Gabriel have battled their way down the siege tower that had connected to the wall, and now they are trying to just like break down the tower entirely. It's made of iron, so they can't use their magic on it, so they're having to like, I don't know, like use their sword and break it down. Meanwhile, Fenris and Gabriel are up on the battlements trying to like shoot at guys that are trying to come at Gabriel and Lorcan, and then they go, once they've dealt with that, they go and they like fight some guys at the castle gates who are trying to use a battering ram to get there. Rowan is busy like sucking the air out of people's lungs with his magic powers. They're just like battling. Lorcan feels a nudge on his shoulder telling him to keep fighting, even though the boys are like calling him back. They're like, okay, time to get back into the battlements. But instead, he leaves Gabriel, leaves the gates, and just starts battling his way down the field into like the melee of like the foot soldiers. It's becoming very clear that they're going to win the battle, but we're in Lorcan's head now, and he's thinking to himself, like, then what? Elide didn't want him. He hadn't deserved her anyway. She deserved a life of peace, of happiness. He didn't know such things. Had thought he'd glimpsed them during the months they traveled together before everything went to hell, but now he knew he was not meant for it, anything like it. But this battlefield, this death song around him, this he could do. This he could save her. And he's fighting towards the Calgon's army. He can like see the Calgon's army and like just the like few remaining Morath men that are left. And he's like making his way there, but then all of a sudden a group of 10 men attack Lorcan all at once, and they're able to like bring him down. They're able to bring him down, and Lorcan was too big to wear the armor they found in the treasure room, and so his back was completely exposed, and so one of the men get a sword in his back, and they're able to like slice his back open, and he falls down into the mud and he's dying. He literally cannot move. The Calgon's army took no prisoners. The last few of Morath's soldiers are picked off by the rooks, and healers are sent into the field to help the injured. The battle is over. There are minimal losses from the Calgon's army, more serious losses from Anielle's force. Daddy Westfall sees them and is a little annoyed that they pillaged the heirloom armor, but Kayla's like, shut up. We won this battle and we would not have won it without them. So if they want to look cute while they're doing it, let them look cute. And Aelin is already like thinking about whether the Southern Continent's army is going to come north with them to Terrasen. She's already like really stressing out about that, really hoping that she had done enough today to like prove that, to like impress Asar, to make it worth it for them to head north with her. But then Nezran lands in the battlements and is like, we have a problem. The dam is severely damaged. It is not going to hold. We need to get everyone on that field out, because it is going to flood the whole field. Remember when I was like, I'm sure nothing bad is going to happen to that dam? Yeah, something bad is going to happen to that dam. All of the Crochans' forces are on this low ground outside of the keep. That's where they've been camping. That's where they are. There's like thousands of them down there. And there's healers out there that are working on the men on the battlefield. Like, it's going to wash away half of the city of Anielle. Like, this is pretty major. It might even wash away some of the lower levels of the keep. Like, if people are in there, the flooding might reach into the keep. And Nezran's like, we need to get everyone out. And Daddy Westfall is like, where? They can't all fit in here. There are thousands of men out there. It will not hold all of them, and that water is going to rage for miles if that dam falls. And Hasar is like, okay, have the rooks fly out as many as we can. But like, there's not that many rooks. I think there's like maybe 50 or 100 rooks there. Like, and they can only fly out a couple people at a time. And have them take as many people as they can into the mountains behind us. Anyone who's close enough to the keep will come inside the keep. We'll try to do the best we can. And Gabrielle's like, we can't fix the dam. And Nezran is like, there's too much damage. We have like literally maybe minutes before it goes down. Like, I'm not a structural engineer, but like, it doesn't look good. Like, it's gonna happen soon. And Kale is like, do you think this was a trap, a way for Erewhon to eliminate this army so it couldn't be brought north? And Aelin is like, I don't know. It seems like maybe not the moment to think about it. And Rowan is like, the lake is too deep for me to freeze. Like, I can't freeze it. It is a massive lake. Like, I don't have enough power to like freeze it and prevent it from going anywhere. And Kayla's like, okay, keep the castle gates open. Have as many people as possible come into the keep. The furthest will need to try to flee into the forest. And Rowan met Aelin's stare. Her hands became shaking. This cannot be, and here she seemed to say, panic. Panic indeed flared in her eyes. Rowan gripped her trembling hand and squeezed, but there was no truth or lie that might soothe her. No truth or lie to save the army on that plain. And Elide comes outside and is like, hi guys, great work on the battle. It seems like everything is going well. Why does everyone look so worried? Why are the vibes so bad up here? And Kale's like, the dam is going to break and wipe everyone on the plains away. It's really bad news. And Elide's like, have we warned the healers? Hafitza is out there on the plains. And Sartak takes off immediately to go rescue Hafitza and the healers from the plains. But Elide is like, okay, what else can we do? And everyone's just like anxiously pacing around. And Elide looks around and realizes that Lorcan is no longer up on the battlements. And she goes, where is Lorcan? And Gabriel's like, last time I saw him, he was down on the battlefield. And Elide goes, where is he? Where is Lorcan? And she realizes that no one else has even thought about it. No one else had even for a half a second considered where Lorcan might be. And she goes, where? No one answered. Elide pointed towards the battlefield and snarled at Gabriel, where did you see him join with the Crochans' forces? And Gabriel's like nearly on the other side of the field. He was so far away. His voice was strained, and he pointed across the plain. I didn't see him after that. Shit, Fenris breathed. Rowan is like, okay, Fenris, can you jump to that field and see if you can spot him and bring him back? Essentially asking Fenris to like winnow. And Fenris is like, I can't. And Rowan is like, you probably can. You didn't use your magic once during the battle. Like, you should be fully ready to go. Fenris casts a pleading glance towards Elide. I can't. Silence fell in the battlement, and then Rowan growled, you won't. He pointed with a bloody finger to the battlefield. You'll let him die. For what? Aelin has forgiven him. Save him. But Fenris swallowed, and Aelin says, leave it, Rowan. And Rowan snarls at her, too. She snarled right back, leave it. And then they have an eyeball combo. And Elide is freaking out, so worried that Lorcan is out there and is going to get swallowed by the flood. She's like, I don't think he's dead. I think I would know if he was dead. Like, I would feel it in my bones if he was dead, but I don't think he's dead. I think he's alive out there. And Elide just starts running through the keep. Elide is sprinting down the stairs, is kind of like getting crushed in the crowd because everyone else is sprinting in the other direction trying to get away from the flood. But she thinks to herself, she had made him a promise. She had sworn him an oath all those months ago. I will always find you. But Elide, like, can't even get down the stairs anymore because there's so many people pushing upward. And so she starts shouting, clear a path for the queen. And that works. Everyone kind of moves out of her way. And you know what? In this moment, Elide is the queen. So clear a path for the queen. She gets to the gate. She's already limping. She knows she's not going to be able to make it to the other side of that field to go look for him before the dam breaks. She's like moving way too slowly. but she knows he's not dead. She's thinking to herself, he's not dead. He is not dead. I will always find you. And she goes and she looks for a rook. Like maybe a rook can take her somewhere. And she's hoping to find something that will help her. But there are no rooks there. And then she sees a horse being led from the stable on the ground level of the keep. Like they're pulling them out of the stables and pulling them back up into the keep just to make sure that they don't get washed away in the flood. She sees a soldier struggling with Kale's horse, Butterfly. And Elide says, I will take her. And the guy's like, great, good. He's like, I don't want to get washed away in this flood, but I was told to go get this horse, so you take care of it. That would be beautiful. The mare, Farasha, yanked so hard on the reins that Elide was nearly hurled across the stones, but she planted her feet, legs screaming, and said to the horse, I have need of you, fierce heart. She met Farsha's dark, raging eyes. I have need of you. Her voice broke. Please. And gods above, that horse stilled, blinked. She climbs onto the horse. Her leg is already in so much pain. She's already so uncomfortable, and she says, to the battlefield, Farasha. I also want us to recall that Elide learned how to ride a horse for the first time, approximately maybe a month ago, maybe 2 months. And she's on this like tiny horse. I don't know if it has a saddle at all. It does have a saddle. It has like a saddle that's sized for Kale. And she's like, honestly, it's a good thing Kale has long legs because I need the little stirrup to be low to the ground. This horse is like giant. She's holding on to it and she rides it out into the field. Meanwhile, up on the battlements, Rowan is contemplating whether to fly out to the dam and like at least assess the situation and see if maybe he can stop it. He knows it's probably a waste of time, but he feels like he needs to do something to help Lorcan. And then Fenris comes over and is like, the gift of winnowing, essentially, was something I shared with my brother. I haven't touched it since my brother died. I don't know if I can. And Rowan is like, I know, I shouldn't have pushed. And I think he should have pushed. I totally understand that, like, this is very traumatic for Fenris. And, like, if it was to go pick up an ice cream sandwich from the local corner store, I would definitely say Rowan shouldn't have pushed. This is to literally save a man's life. Save a man that has been, like, their brother, that has fought alongside of them for decades and centuries. And we're not even going to try. Like, I'm not saying, like, if Fenris can't do it, he should be shamed, but he, like, isn't going to try. We're not going to try. You're not going to give it a good college try, Fenris? I do think you should have pushed. It was, like, actually insane to me that they're like, oh, it's such a bummer that Lorcan's out there and he's going to die. No one except Elide is, like, even thinking for half a second, like, oh, I should go save Lorcan. Rowan is like, okay, I'm going to fly out there and see if I can spot him. And Hussar is like, don't bother, she's already ahead of you. And they look out and they see Elide riding, like galloping as fast as that horse can go out into the battlefield. Which means that they have been chatting about this for at least 5 minutes. Like, Elide didn't teleport downstairs. You guys have been chatting about this for at least 5 minutes. This is a castle. It's pretty effing big. We haven't done anything. Rowan can literally fly. Rowan can fly. He can turn into a bird and fly. And he didn't even for a second be like, maybe I'll just go assess the situation. And if the dam starts flooding, he can again fly. Anyway. And Hussar's like, if any of you go down there to try to help her, you will be killed too. It went against every instinct, against the centuries and training fighting he'd done with Lorcan. But the princess was right. To lose one life was better than several, especially when he would need his cadre so badly during the rest of the war. Lorcan would agree and had taught Rowan to make those sorts of hard calls. Still, Aelin remained silent, as if she had descended deep within herself, and gazed at the battlefield, at the small rider and the mighty horse racing across it. Rowan can literally fly. I understand that, like, he can't, like, he's not a big enough creature that, like, if he found Lorcan, he couldn't, like, scoop Lorcan up and, like, get him out of there, but he could at least locate Lorcan. Elide is down there on her horse, like, looking for Lorcan. If we had 2 people looking for Lorcan, we could maybe get him on Elide's horse and get him out of there. Like, why does Rowan not fly down there? He's like, that's a lost cause. I guess we'll just watch from up here. Also, like, where is Falcon? I, like, really had this question a lot during the Battle of Anielle. Like, where did Falcon go? Like, honestly, if the witches were here, oh my gosh, can you imagine if the witches were here? If, like, the 13 were here, Miss Manon would already be down there. She would have Lorcan and Elide already on Abraxas, and she'd be yelling at them. She would say to Lorcan, she'd say, how dare you be so irresponsible and put baby Elide at risk? Because you were not thinking of yourself. Elide put herself at risk. And Elide, we don't do that for a man. This is embarrassing. We're going to have to talk about this when we get home. Like, Miss Manon would have taken care of them. Not cool, guys. Not cool. We're back with Elide. She's down on the battlefield looking for her boy, Lorcan. I'm going to call it Butterfly because I'm better at pronouncing that. Butterfly was a tempest beneath her, but the mare did not seek to unseat Elide as they thundered across the body-strewn plain. Elide is just shouting Lorcan's name, trying to find him, but there are like dead people everywhere. There are bodies everywhere, and the sound is just getting eaten up by these men trying to escape. They're people just running off this battlefield trying to get to higher ground to avoid the flooding that is about to happen. She's looking over every single body she passes for his black hair, and she keeps thinking to herself, I will always find you. And she's like, that dam is gonna hold until I find my man. That dam will hold, mark my words, until I find my man. Back up on the battlements, they're just watching her. And Yrene comes out on the battlements and she's like, hey, oh my gosh, I heard about the dam. That is so crazy. I sent Elide to. Chaol's wife's words drifted off as she beheld the lone rider charging away from the masses, thundering for the keep. Silba, save her, Yrene whispered. Lorcan's down there, was all Chaol said by way of explanation. Still, Elide kept riding, racing against death itself. Princess Hussar said quietly, that girl is a fool. The bravest I've ever seen, but a fool nonetheless. Helios guards Lorcan, Fenris murmured, and Aneath, his consort, watches over Elide. Perhaps they will find each other. Helios's horse, Chaol said. He shook his head and gestured to the fields, the black mare and her rider. I call Farasha Helios's horse. I've done her from the moment I met her. As if meeting that horse, bringing her here, was not as much for him as for this desperate race across an endless battlefield. I'm sorry, like, the connections that Sarah J. Maas makes. Anyway, we continue. Elide is riding right now next to the lake, still screaming Lorcan's name. And she finally sees a cluster of bodies that appear to be Valg, none of the Cogon's men, and she knows it is where Lorcan must be because only he would have been capable of downing all these men alone. Like in all the other spots, there were like a mixture of the Cogon's men and Morath's men, obviously, because you know, they were like both dying as they battled each other. But this spot is only Morath's men. She knows it must be where Lorcan is, and she starts to get worried that like maybe he did evacuate, maybe she came down here for nothing, maybe he's back at the keep and they just like missed each other, and she starts to get stressed out. But then she's still calling his name, and a hand rises out of a pile of bodies. And so she starts digging through these corpses, like pushing bodies off of this man as swords and armor cut into her skin as she like tries to free Lorcan from where he is like hidden under these people. He's alive, but he's bleeding badly. His back has not healed up at all because he was injured so like grievously. Normally the Fae would like kind of heal themselves, but in this case he hadn't been able to heal himself. And Elide gets down and is like, Lorcan, the dam is about to break. We need to get out of here. And she tries to lift him up. But remember, this man is like 6'7" and she's like 5 foot even. She's tiny. She probably weighs a third of what Lorcan weighs. And Lorcan, she's like, okay, Lorcan, we got to get you out of here. Get up. Get up. He grabs her and tries to pull himself up, like on her, like tries to brace himself on her waist and pull himself up. But she like cries out because it hurts her ankle so badly, her injured ankle. And Lorcan stops and she's like, no, keep going. Get up. But he looks over and he uses the horse instead. He's like, the horse could probably bear my weight better than this tiny lady. And so he uses the horse to hoist himself up. And Elide can now like fully see how badly this injury in his back is. Like his back is like fully exposed and she can see just like how bad of an injury it is. Elide ducked under him until his arm was slung across her shoulders. Thighs burning, ankle shrieking in pain, Elide pushed. Lorcan pulled at the same time, and Farasha holding steady, he groaned against it. His body teetering. Don't stop, Elide hissed. Don't you dare stop. His breath came in shallow gasps, but Lorcan got to his feet under him, inch by inch. Slipping his arm from Elide's shoulder, he lurched to grip the saddle, to cling to it. He panted and panted. Fresh blood sliding from his back, too. This ride would be agony, but they had no choice, none at all. Now up. Elide is like, okay, great work standing. Get on this horse. She didn't let him hear the terror and despair in her voice. Get into that saddle. She says to him, you didn't Redding die, she snapped, and we're not dead yet. You're not dead yet. We're not dead yet, so get in that saddle. When Lorcan did nothing other than breathe and breathe, Elide spoke again. I promised to always find you. I promised you, and you promised me. I came for you because of it. I am here because of it. I am here for you, do you understand? And if we don't get onto that horse now, we will not stand a chance against that dam. We will die. And that is enough to get Lorcan moving, because Lorcan is like happy to die on the battlefield. Like that was something he had come to accept. But Elide dying, he's not cool with that. And so he starts to lift himself into the saddle, and when he stops, like stops again, Elide starts yelling at him again. She says, "Get up!" Her command barked over the panicked cries of fleeing soldiers. "Get in that saddle right now." Lorcan didn't move, his body trembling. Elide screamed, "Get up now!" And she shoves him so hard she feels something in her ankle snap. She's like shoving him into the saddle. And Lorcan like fully gets in there and he like slumps over. He can't even hold himself up. And then he reaches a hand back for her. Elide ignores it. She's like, it was so much work to get him into the saddle. I am not going to pull him down. Elide, you are literally tiny. I don't think you'd pull him down. But she like pulls herself in. She like tries to like jump, just like leap onto the horse, but her broken ankle is like really doesn't let her up. And so Lorcan winds up hauling her the rest of the way up, grabs the back of her jacket and pulls her on. And then he kind of like collapses into her as she grabs the reins, starts steering the horse out of there. She says, "To the keep, friend," she said, digging her heels into the horse's side, faster than the wind. Nothing had ever seemed so distant, far enough that she could not see if the keep's lower gate was still open, if anyone held it, waited for them. Hold the gate. Hold the gate. Every thunderous beat of ferocious hooves over the corpses of the fallen echoed Elide's silent prayer as they raced across the endless plain. Hold the gate. Agony was a song in Lorcan's blood, in his bones, his breath. Every step of that horse, every leap she made over a body and debris sent it ringing afresh. There was no end, no mercy from it. It was all he could do to keep in the saddle, to cling to consciousness, to keep his arm around Elide. She had come for him, had found him. Somehow on this endless battlefield, his name on her lips had been a summons that he could never deny, even when death had held him so gently, nestled beneath all of those he'd felled and waited for his last breaths. And now, charging toward that too distant keep, so far behind the droves of soldiers and riders racing for the gates, he wondered if these minutes would be his last, her last. She had come for him. We're gonna take a moment, actually. I will actually be switching clients. I do believe Kayla no longer needs my services. Kayla is now a wifed up man. He's doing well. I work for Lorcan now. I've taken on a pro bono client, and that is Mr. Lorcan. I have always loved Elide and Lorcan, but I feel like I found a new level of appreciation for Lorcan in this reread, particularly as I was working kind of in this book. As I was working on this section, I saw TikTok, because now my TikTok is almost entirely Throne of Glass. Like, if you have made a Throne of Glass TikTok, probably in the past year, I probably have seen it, because TikTok is like almost exclusively showing me Throne of Glass TikToks, okay? And I love it. Please never change. Anyway, I saw this TikTok about this girl talking about how like we often forget that like Lorcan was like in love with Maeve. We like talked about it earlier this video, that he like wasn't really in love with her, but he was like a little bit obsessed with her, and Maeve rejected him. He offered himself to Maeve and was like, "You could kiss me if you wanted." And Maeve was like, "Ew, no, gross." But even despite that, he was like so loyal to her. He was loyal to her, like probably above like any of the other men except maybe Connell. But Connell, like Maeve had taken as like a lover. There was something about that that made something like click in me. The fact that we don't know much about Lorcan's past. I don't know if we know anything really about what his life was like before he joined with Maeve. But like you can imagine that this fae who has this like death magic that no one has seen before would be someone that is just like feared, kind of thought of to be bad before he does anything, and I think probably often rejected. And I can imagine that even Maeve, who rejected him but like kept him around and like made sure he knew he was useful to her, that was like so tempting. I think we see in this book in particular that Lorcan so desperately wants to be loved. He just like desperately wants to be loved, and I think Lorcan likely fell in love with the person who like saw him, didn't find him frightening, and I think he probably hasn't met a lot of people that encounter him that way. And I do think we also know Lorcan to be this like man of his word. Like he has been trouble, but even in those first books when we met him in like Queen of Shadow, like he was a man of his word. Like Rowan was like, if Lorcan makes a promise, that he's going to keep that promise. And he also was looking out for Maeve's best interest, not just Maeve's power. Like he wasn't uninterested in just like getting Maeve more power for power's sake, and really was trying to make sure Maeve had like the best possible life, even though she's evil. He's just like a man trying to do the right thing. There's something that is incredibly powerful about his relationship with Elide, because Elide is just like this small, precious thing who is so fierce, who like sees him and loves him anyway, this like terror of a man, and says like, this man deserves a home, he deserves to be safe, he deserves to be rescued. Elide is urging this horse on faster and faster. They can see the gate now, they're getting close, and Lorcan realizes they're not going to make it to the gate in time. Lorcan realizes they're never going to make it to the gate in time because he's too heavy, and the horse can't run very fast with him on its back. Like it could run a lot faster if it just had little Elide on there. That would be so much easier. Can you make less noise, please? There's a dog in here standing on a plastic bag. It's a little noisy. He realizes, like, once the dam breaks, it's going to take less than a minute for the water to reach them, and they'll be washed away. And he thinks to himself, she had come for him. She had found him. The world went quiet. The pain in his body faded into nothing, into something secondary. Lorcan slid his other arm around Elide, bringing his mouth close to her ear as he said, you have to let me go. And Elide is like, no. And he says, you have to, Elide. You have to. I am too heavy, and without my weight, you might make it to the keep in time. No. The salt of her tears filled his nose. Lorcan brushed his mouth over her damp cheek, ignoring the roaring pain in his body. The horse galloped and galloped as if it might outrace death itself. I love you, he whispered in Elide's ear. I have loved you from the moment you picked up that axe to slay the Ilkin. Her tears flowed past him in the wind. And I will be with you. His voice broke, but he made himself say the words, the truth in his heart. I will be with you always. He was not frightened of what would come. For him, once he tumbled off that horse, he was not frightened at all, if it meant her reaching the keep. So Lorcan kissed Elide's cheek again, allowed himself to breathe in her scent one last time. I love you, he repeated, and began to withdraw his arms from around her waist. And Elide is like, absolutely not. She digs her nails into Lorcan's arm, and she refuses to let go. That is a witch move. That is a witch move. This is a little witch slang, don't you forget. And so Lorcan realizes if he falls off the horse, if he lets himself tumble off this horse, he will bring Elide with him down, and it'll kill them both. And so he realizes together they would either outrun this or die together. Elide, he tries to plead with her again, and Elide just says to the horse, fly, Farasha. She cracked the reins. Fly, fly, fly. And gods help her. That horse did. As if the gods that had crafted her filled the mare's lungs with his own breath. Farasha gave a surge of speed, faster than the wind, faster than death, and they are passing soldiers and getting closer, only a mile left to the gate, but then they hear the dam break. Rowan and Yrene are just like watching the battlements on the keep, and Fenris is like, they're not going to make it. And Rowan made himself stand there to watch the last moments of the Lady of Perranth and his former commander. It was all he could offer, witnessing their death so he might tell the story to those he encountered, so they would not be forgotten. And then Rowan starts looking around and is like, actually, this wave looks like pretty big. We might need to get to higher ground. And he's like, I gotta get Aelin out of here. And then he looks around and Aelin's missing. You gotta keep your eye on her at all times. Rowan should have known better. Aelin's gone. That's right, my girly Aelin Galathines would never sit around while her friends die. Okay? She would never do that like you divas. You, Rowan, who have literal wings growing out of your back. Oh my gosh. Like, we could do something, Rowan. No. Okay, anyway, Aelin would never sit by and allow that to happen. We should have known better. Aelin was not going to let all these people who came to help her get washed away in a tidal wave. You know where she is? She's dangling from Rock's talons. I don't know how they schemed this without anyone noticing. Don't ask questions. Aelin is a master schemer. I believe if anyone could do it, it would be Aelin, mother effing Galathinius. And she's clutched in Rock's talons, just like hanging there. Rowan is having a literal heart attack on the walls. And then Aelin shoots out a pillar of flame that like tunnels into the hot springs below ground. There's like geothermal springs that are all under Anielle. Aelin like taps into their power, and she pulls like a pillar of fire back into Aelin, and she held out her hand before her, fist closed, as if it would halt the wave in its tracks. He knew then, either as her mate or her Coronum, he knew. 3 months, Rowan breathed. The others stilled. 3 months, he said again, his knees wobbling. She has been making her descent into her magic for 3 months. Every day she had been with Maeve, she had been tunneling deeper, and even since she's been freed, she had continued tunneling deeper. To gather up the full might of her magic, not for the lock, not for Erewhon, but for Maeve's death blow. A few weeks of descent had taken her power to devastating levels. 3 months of it. Holy gods. Holy rutting gods. When her fire hit the wall of water, now towering over her, when they collided, Rowan shouted for everyone to get down. Elide and Lorcan were still too far from the gates. Thousands of soldiers were still too far from the gates as the wave crested above them, as Aelin opened her hand towards it, and fire erupted. Cobalt fire. The raging soul of a flame. The tidal wave of it, taller than the raging waters it blasted from her, flaring wide. Rowan plunges into his magic to blow the steam that has been created into the mountains and away from everyone, because, like, she's essentially, like, boiling this giant ass lake. Maeve's death blow spent here to save the army that might mean Terrasen's salvation, to spare the lives on that plane. Rowan's almost at burnout to try to keeping the steam away from everyone, and Fenris and Gabrielle are like literally holding him up as he tries to create gust after gust of wind to blow the steam away. Princess Hussar said, rising beside him, "That power is no blessing." "Tell that to your soldiers," Fenris snarled, standing too. "I did not mean it that way," Hussar sniped, and awe was indeed on her face. And Aelin kept her flame burning until the lake waters had fallen low enough to not cause damage. Fire flickered through the mist, blue and turning to gold and red, a muted, throbbing glow. Rowan splat blood onto the battlement stones, his breath like shards of glass in his throat. The glowing flame shrank, steam rippling past, until there was only a slim pillar of fire, veiled in the mist-shrouded plain. Not a pillar of fire, but Aelin, glowing white-hot, as if she herself had given so wholly to the flame that she had become the fire herself. For 3 months she had sung to the darkness and the flame, and they had sung back. For 3 months she had burrowed so deep inside her power that she had plundered undiscovered depths. While Maeve and Karn had worked on her, she had delved, never letting them know what she mined, what she gathered to her day by day by day. A death blow. One to wipe a dark queen from this earth forever. She'd kept that power coiled in herself even after she'd been freed from the irons, had struggled to keep it down in those weeks, the strain enormous. Some days it had been easier to barely speak, some days swaggering arrogance had been her key to ignoring it. Yet when she had seen that wave, when she had seen Elide-Lorcan choosing death together, when she had seen that army that might save Terrasen, she had known. She'd felt the fire sleeping under the city and knew they had come here for a reason. She had come here for this reason. Ugh. The glow fades, and she's just a girl once more. And Rowan flies over to her as she falls to her knees, and then Aelin can feel him pick her up, and they get her on a rook, and they then everything goes black. I just love this scene because it is just so true to what we know of Aelin. Aelin has always, from the moment we met her, even when she was Helena Starthothian, has always used whatever power she has been given access to help the people who cannot help themselves. If she has access to power and an ability to help someone who is standing in front of her, she's gonna do it. Every time. Break from Anielle. We're gonna go check on the witches. The 13 and the Crochans wind up sticking together. After that, the Crochans wind up not leaving kind of immediately. They go to a camp that's a little bit further away from Terrasen, but closer to Morath, just to make sure they're not in the same spot in case the matrons decide they want to strike again. But they are kind of keeping watch. They're on guard, but they've decided not to separate. It did kind of change things because now Manon is officially the queen of the Crochans, and it's really unclear where they're headed next, where they're headed after this. But then Dorian heads to bed. He's planning to leave for Morath pretty soon. But this time Manon follows him back to her tent. I really believe this is her tent that Dorian has stolen from her. Kind of rude. Tent time! Manon is still wearing that crown of stars as she comes in the tent, and Dorian is like, "Hey girlie, you don't have to wear that all the time. We're allowed to take them off." And Manon says, "This is not so heavy." Dorian says, since it seems it is made of light itself, I imagine not, though that crown would weigh heavily in other ways he knew." "So you're talking to me," she said, not bothering to segue gracefully. "I talked to you before. Is it because I am queen now?" "You were queen prior to today," Dorian says. "I thought it would be more satisfying to see her run, her grandmother." "When you killed your father, what did you feel?" Manon asked. "Rage, hate." He didn't balk from the truth in his words, the ugliness. Manon, "Do you think I should have killed her?" Dorian, "I don't think so. Her death would have made her a martyr. It was a demoralizing defeat. It might destabilize things for the witches, destabilize and decentralize the power." And then she says to Dorian, "I am sorry," she said, "for how I spoke to you when I learned of your plans to go to Morath." And then Dorian teases, "It seems like that Crochan do-gooder behavior is rubbing off on you, Manon." She smiled halfway at that. "Mother help me if I ever become so dull." But Dorian's amusement faded. "I accept your apology." And Manon's like, "So you're leaving tomorrow?" And Dorian goes, "Yep." And Manon's like, "Okay, what's the plan?" "You witches have brooms and wyverns. I've learned to make my own wings." And Manon is like, "Morath is a death trap." And Dorian says, "Yeah, I know, it is." And Manon is like, "But we cannot come with you." Dorian, "I know." Manon, "You are not afraid to go alone?" Dorian, "Of course I am afraid. Anyone in their right mind would be, but my task is more important than my fear, I think." Manon, "And if I ask you to stay?" And Dorian says, "I would need a very convincing reason, I suppose." And Manon goes, "Because I don't want you to go." And then she takes all of her clothes off, so she's not wearing anything except the crown. As this conversation continues, so you know that. She's just sitting there naked. Let's continue. And Manon says to him, "We could make an alliance between the Ironteeth, the Crochans, and Ardelane. Between you and me." Her golden eyes lifted to his, the offer gleaming there, to marry, to unite their peoples in the strongest, most unbreakable of terms. Manon just proposed to Dorian, essentially. But then Dorian says, you don't want that. You would never want to be shackled to any man like that. Okay, I want you to remember this when I later say things that some of you are not gonna like, okay? In the last video, when I talk about some stuff that I don't think some of you will like very much, I want you to remember this moment. He could see the truth there in her beautiful face, that she agreed with him, but she shook her head, the starlight dancing on her hair. The Crochans have not offered to fly to war. I have not yet dared ask them, but if I had the strength of Ardalain beside me, perhaps they might be convinced at last. Dorian thinks she would be his wife, his queen. She was already his equal, his match, his mirror in so many other ways. And with their union, the world would know it. But he could see that bars of the cage that would creep closer and tighter every day, either break her wholly or turn her into something neither of them wished her to ever be. Dorian says, you would marry me all so we could aid Terrasen in this war? Manon says, Aelin is willing to die to end this conflict. Why should she bear the brunt of the sacrifice? And then that's enough to like remind Dorian what he is going to do. Like he is planning right now. Dorian's plan is to go get the final word key and like close the lock, seal the lock the lock, whatever he needs to do. Sacrifice himself to do that. You are right, she said quietly. I am afraid. Manon laid her hand over his. I am afraid that you will go to Morath and return as something I do not know. Something I shall have to kill. And Dorian says, I know. Oh, and then they make out for a while, and then that night they snuggle. Okay, remember they've been sleeping together like this whole time, but Manon has drawn the line at snuggling. She says no snuggling allowed in this tent. But that night they snuggle. But in the morning, Dorian is gone, and he has taken both word keys with him. And I do have some questions about this, okay? Like, I understand that his plan is to go to Morath and, like, do the lock situation. But, like, wouldn't it have been smarter to leave the two of the word keys with Manon? Like, it seems kind of silly, crazy, cuckoo bananas to bring all the two of the word keys to Erewhon. He has the third. To be like, let's reunite all these word keys, like, in this moment. Like, I'm sure Manon would hold on to them for you. And then you could go get them. And then you could, like, turn it into the lock. I don't know if this is the best idea. Oh, and then we have a quick map. We're just going to do like a quick map-a-roo because we've got some movement that is like happening on the move. And so I wanted to kind of just give you a lay of the land. Okay, this is like the northeast corner of Aurelia. So the blue circle is where the crew has been in Anielle. And the green flag is because Terrasen has just won that battle. So they are in the boss of Anielle. And they're about to head up this way, either along the river or through the mountains, up towards Terrasen. So that's where Aelin and everybody else is. And then we have Morath, which is the southmost black flag, which is where Dorian is headed. I think right now they are like kind of like parallel to that in the white fangs. And then we have the black flag on Rifthold, because remember Rifthold is currently controlled by Morath. And then up at the top of the screen we have an X over Perranth, the city they just lost. It also has a black flag because now it's controlled by Morath. And then we have the star, which is at Orinth, which is like the capital of Terrasen, which is where Aedion and the crew was trying to head, although they've been kind of like put in a situation in which they're about to battle Erewhon's forces once again. So we'll see if they make it there. But that's kind of where everyone's at. Speaking of that, we are about to go check in on Aedion and everyone. Aedion is leading the troops. Technically, they're Killian's troops, so technically Killian is leading them right now, but like he will not make any decisions without consulting Aedion first. They're headed to Orinth. They're walking right along the shores of the Ferian River right now as they retreat from the Valg. And Aedion goes to Ren and is like, hey Ren, I need you to do me a favor. And Ren is like, are you going to ask me to leave? Because I like won't do that. And he's like, no. Can you call for aid? Like literally send to like literally anyone you can think of and tell them that Terrasen asked for aid. And Ren is like, will anyone come? And Aedion says, none came 10 years ago, but maybe someone will bother this time. And Ren says, there may be nothing left to defend Aedion. Like, I don't think we have enough time to wait for aid to arrive. And Aedion is like, we have to send for aid anyway. Like, we cannot give up hope. And Ren is like, okay, I'll do it. On my way. So Ren's doing that. But Morath has caught up with them, and Aedion wonders how much further the witch tower is behind them. He doesn't know if it's like close behind or if they have like a little bit of time before they have to deal with the witch tower. Just like even the troops, they have so many less men than Morath at this point. They've just been like really decimated by their attacks, and so things are not looking good. He spots Lysandra in slow leopard form in the lines, and Aedion is sad because he knows that Lysandra is going to die with the rest of them. Like, they are going to die here. Terrasen's side sends over arrows as Morath approaches, and then Morath's side returns fire, but it doesn't return fire with arrows, it returns fire with human heads. That army that Ansel had promised that was coming down from the north, it's their heads. the army must have been intercepted by Morath and was wiped out and was decimated. Which is just like their one hope at like maybe if they had a little bit more support, they would be able to get out of this, has just been crushed. We fight as one, Aedion called down the line, forcing himself to ignore the scattered heads at their feet. We die as one. The armies are about to meet when all of a sudden there's a blast of flame. Aedion immediately assumes it's Aelin, but it isn't Aelin. It's Captain Rolf with the Mysian fleet. He has gathered the lost Mysians, and he's back. They doubted he would ever return because he's a pirate king, but the pirate king made good, and they have so many fire lances, which were purchased by Mr. Cale Westfall Towers, our beloved. A horn blasted from the river, and then the fire lances unleashed white-hot flames into Morath's ranks, as if they were plumes from hell, dragons, all of them spewing fire upon their enemies. Morath turned and ran. And Aedion urges all the troops onto boats. They're able to get all the troops onto boats and across to the other side of the river, so they're safer now. And Ansel is, like, sobbing while this is happening. She has been, like, rescued, but all of her troops, her men from Briarcliff, have been slaughtered. Ansel has had like really a rough go at things. Like Ansel, we first meet Ansel and we learn that she's like an orphan. Her family and siblings were like murdered in front of her by witches, and she like worked so hard and finally got her kingdom back. And now her army, she came to help Aelin because she's a good lady, and now her whole army has been slaughtered. Poor Ansel. Anyway, they get on the boat and every single soldier makes it out. Like they didn't lose a single person in that battle because it really hadn't started yet by the time the fleet arrived, and so they all get on the boats. Lysandra runs over to Rolf, shifts into human form and hugs them. And she is butt naked, and he very gentlemanly puts a cloak around her before he hugs her back. And Rolf says to them, "You looked like you were in need of a rescue." And Aedion is like, "I assume we have your magic map to thank for this." And Rolf says, "Yes. Also, Ravi and Sol of Surya said you might need some help." And Aedion says, "Thank you." And Rolf is like, "Of course, we surprised Morath this time, but like we will not be able to hold them off for long." And Aedion is like, "We need to get to Orinth. We need to like protect Orinth. That is our best hope. At least then we have like the protection of the city walls." And Rolf is like, "I can't take all of your men to Orinth. We had like enough like longboats to get people across the river, but there's not enough for us to like transport everyone upriver. There's only so many of you I can take, but I can take you and like a small crew to like Orinth to prepare. Is Aelin here?" And Lysandra's like, "Nope." And Rolf was like, "Okay, we'll make do without her." And Aedion said, "Let me send word to our troops to march to Orinth and we'll sail for the city." And Lysandra is like, "Okay, I'll take care of it." And she turns into a bird and goes to like tell the men on the shore to like, "Okay, we're marching to Orinth, and then we're taking the small crew via boat up to Orinth, so they'll be up there a little bit sooner." And Aedion asked Rolf, like, "How many of these fire lances do you have? These have been super helpful." And Rolf is like, "Not enough to outlast a siege. Like, if we truly are going to have a siege on the city of Orinth, like, we do not have enough. Also, like, they're going to be much harder to use within the city, obviously. They're really only useful for, like, boat warfare, I believe." Then we cut to Miss Yrene. She is still pretty rattled post-battle, thinking about the devastation that they would have faced if Aelin hadn't been there. She had taken care of both Aelin and Rowan. Aelin had like literally not a scratch on her, totally fine, but she was unconscious. And Rowan was awake, but was like kind of banged up a little bit. And he's like, "I will be able to heal myself. None of the injuries were like very major." He's like, "As soon as I rest, like I'll get my magic back. I'll be able to heal myself." And so he shoos her away. But Lorcan was in rough shape. It took Yrene and Hafitza working for many hours to save him. He was very seriously injured and very close to death, but they were able to do it. Now he's chilling, he's rested. When Lorcan wakes up, he's in his room, and Reese is sitting there watching him, and Fenris says to him, "You are one lucky bastard. You've been unconscious for a full day." And Lorcan notes that he's like really not in any pain. He has like some like tightness where his cut on his back was, and some just like general throbbing pain. Hearing from, like, you know, being almost gutted. And the first thing Lorcan says is Elide. He, like, doesn't remember what happened. He remembers everything up to the moment they went through the gates. The moment he went through the gates, he doesn't remember. And we come to find out he, like, fell off that horse immediately. He was out. And they, like, you know, got him up here and got him cleaned up and safe. But, like, he's like, "Where's Elide? Is she okay?" And Fenris is like, "She's fine. She's just in the hall helping with the healers." And then Lorcan goes back to sleep. A few hours later, Lorcan wakes up. It is nighttime. It's dark in his room except for a candle. And Elide is at the foot of his bed. And she's fallen asleep. She's like kind of like collapsed. She's sitting in a chair, but she's like kind of like strewn over the mattress. And he like reaches out and touches her hand. And she like startles awake. Lorcan had no other words. He'd given her everything in the back of that horse anyway. And Elide asked him, how do you feel? Because she's respectful and responsible. Remember, this is like how you greet someone who has been unconscious for a day because they were seriously injured in a battle. You say, how are you? That's like an appropriate thing to say first. Aedion like really needs to take notes on like appropriate human interactions. And Lorcan says, I'm alive. Elide, Yrene said you would have died if they hadn't gotten to you when they did. Lorcan says, I would have died if you hadn't braved hell to find me. Elide, I made you a promise. Lorcan, so you said. Elide, you said some interesting things too. Elide smiles at him. His heart halted. The first smile she had given him in months and months. Since that day on the ship when he touched her hand as they swayed in their hammocks. Her smile faded, but the color on her cheeks lingered. Did you mean it, what you said? He held her stare, let some inner wall within him come crumbling down, only for her. For the sharp-eyed, cunning little liar who had slipped through every defense and ironclad rule he had ever made for himself. He let her see that in his face, let her see all of it, as no one had ever done before. Yes, I meant every word. His heart thundered so wildly it was a wonder she couldn't hear it. And I will until the day I fade into the afterworld. Lorcan didn't breathe as Elide gently reached out her hand and interlaced their fingers. I love you, she whispered. He was glad he was lying down. The words would have knocked him to his knees. Yeah, obviously. Lorcan has bad knees when it comes to Elide. Even now, he was half inclined to bow before her, the true owner of his ancient, wicked heart. I have loved you, she went on, from the moment you came to fight for me against Vernon and the Ilkin. The light in her eyes stole his breath. And when I heard you were somewhere on that battlefield, the only thing I wanted to be able to tell you was that. It was the only thing that mattered. Lorcan apologizes again for everything. He's like, I will spend the rest of my life apologizing for the mistake I made. Again, Aedion takes some notes, and Elide this time accepts his apology. And is like, okay, I should go help Yrene again with the healing. Like, there's a lot to be done. And Lorcan's like, stay. Elide is like petting his head, and he does it purr, which is a little unfortunate, okay? Sometimes I just have to report what I read. And Elide is petting his head, and he is purring like he's a cat. I didn't write it. Sometimes love is cringy. And then Elide says, say it. And Lorcan says, I love you. She swallowed hard, and Lorcan gritted his teeth as he sat up fully, this close. He had forgotten how much he towered over her. Atop that horse, she had been a force of nature, a defiant storm. Elide runs a finger down his new scar. And is like, Yrene says you might always have this. And he says, then it will be the scar I treasure most. Fenris would laugh until he cried to hear him speak this way, but Lorcan didn't care. To hell with the rest of them. Another one of those small smiles curved her lips, and Lorcan's hands tightened in the sheets, with the effort it took not to taste that smile, to worship it with his own mouth. But this new fragile thing humming between them, he would not risk it for all of the world. Elide, thank the gods, had no such worries, none at all it seemed, as she lifted a hand to his cheek and ran her thumb along it. Every breath was an effort of control. Lorcan held absolutely still as she brought her mouth to his, brushed her lips across his own. She pulled back. Rest, Lorcan. I'll be here again when you wake. Anything she'd asked, he'd give her. Anything at all. We're gonna pause for a second because why did I make that as its own slide? Because that's all I ask. That's all I ask. Is it that hard? Bring that man to his knees. I went to his knees shaking. When I get annoyed when this Throne of Glass in general is called the romantasy because I really don't think it's a romantasy. But Elide and Lorcan's story is all I ever want from a romantasy. If, in fact, actually, I would put a little request out to everyone watching right now. If you're watching this and you have a book recommendation for any book, contemporary romance, fantasy, romantasy, historical, I don't care. I'll read it in any genre. Could be a Western. I've never read a Western in my life, but I'll read it if it has the dynamic of Lorcan and Elide. Leave them in the comments below. It's the toll for watching this video. It's the tax. I'm charging a tax. And you have to give me a book rec in the comments down below. That is a Lorcan Elide book. Anything she asked, he'd give her. Anything at all. Too shaken by that soft, beautiful kiss to bother with words. He laid back down as she smiled at his utter obedience, as if she couldn't help herself, leaned in once more. Then Lorcan puts a stop to their makeout session. He says, okay, go help Yrene. I will be here when you're ready for sleep. Just sleep for now. And he thinks to himself that, like, okay, they're not going to move too fast. He's going to make sure she is, like, ready. But, like, he, like, wishes to share it all with her. Like, he's like, I'm committing my life to this girl. She's the boss of me. I love her so much. Every single breath that I breathe from this moment henceforth is for Elide. But, like, we're going to take it slow. We're not going to get anything. We're not going to get crazy. But also, I want her sleeping in my bed so I can keep her safe. So sleeping at his side where he might watch over her as she had watched over him. And then as she's headed out the door, Lorcan wraps a tendril of his magic around her ankle to brace it again. I also thought like she broke her ankle, but I think Yrene must have healed it. Now it's just like her normal injury, her like chronic injury. Elide says, I missed that. He heard the unspoken words as she had disappeared into the busy hallway. I missed you. Lorcan allowed himself a rare smile. It's just so good. Back with the witches. It is dawn. Manon is like staring out into the dawn after Dorian has left, and Astrid comes up behind her, and Astrid is like, Dorian has gone to Morath, and Manon nods, unable to find the words. She had offered him everything, and had thought he had meant to accept it, had thought he did accept it with what they had done afterwards, yet it had been a farewell, one last coupling before he had ventured into the jaws of death. He would not cage her, would not accept what she had given, as if he knew her better than she knew herself. And Astrid's like, do we go after him? And before Manon can answer, one of the Crochans yells, Terrasen calls for aid. They've been sent a messenger. Terrasen calls for aid, the scout panted, bracing her hands on her knees as she bent down to gulp down more breaths. Morath routed them at the border, and then at Perranth, and then advances on Orinth as we speak. They will sack the city within the week. Worse news than Manon had anticipated, even if she waited for it. Bronwyn, what says you, Queen of Witches? A challenge and a dare. Manon lifted her chin at the two paths before her, one to the east, to Morath, the other northward, to Terrasen and to battle. The wind sang, and in it she heard the answer. Manon says, I shall answer Terrasen's call. Astrid says, as shall I. And Sorrel chimes in, as shall the 13. Bronwyn steps forward, and the Vanora hearth shall fly north. Another witch steps forward. So shall the Cillian clan. Until the leaders of all 7 of the great hearths stood there, gathered, until Glenys said to Manon, long ago, Rhiannon Crochan rode at King Brandon's side into battle. So has her likeness been reborn. So shall the old alliances be forged anew. She gestured towards the eternal flame. Light the flame of war, Queen of Witches, and rally your host. Manon only said, your queen summons you to war as she lights the eternal flame. And then the scout jumps on the broom and finds the next clan to tell them the call has gone out. Back in, Anielle, Aelin wakes up and she's asleep next to her husband. Aelin woke to the scent of pine and snow and knew she was home. Not in Terrasen, not yet, but in the sense she would always be home if Rowan was with her. In 3 days since the battle, since the rest of the Crochans army led by Prince Cashin had arrived, so now the whole army is there. Gabriel has spent the entire 3 days that Rowan and Aelin have been resting, sitting outside of their door, because it is actually a really dangerous period for the Fae when they are like in this deep sleep to recoup their magic. Gabriel has sat out there outside their door and mountain lion for him the entire time to make sure that they were safe, which is so sweet. We love him. And Aelin is just kind of like laying there watching Rowan, and then he wakes up and the first words he says to her are, show off. Aelin says, you put on a pretty fancy display yourself, Prince. And then Rowan is like, will that display be the last of your surprises, or are there more coming? And I think this is a dumb question from Rowan, because I think as Aelin's mate, you unfortunately have been signed up for surprises for the rest of your long life. But Aelin is like, fine, I will tell you, she does have a surprise up her sleeve. Rowan sat up, the blanket sliding from him. Is this the sort of surprise that will end with my heart stopping dead in my chest? Aelin says, I sent a letter when we were at the port in Wendelin to Aedion, but also to your uncle, explaining what had happened to me, and that Maeve is an evil, evil lady, and probably that we should kick Maeve off the throne. And Rowan is like, do you think a letter could really convince him to like kick Maeve off the throne? And Aelin is like, it was a very strongly worded letter. Let's not underestimate an Aelin Galathini's letter. Like, she's moved some pretty big mountains with some strongly worded letters. I may have mentioned that she was Valg also. Rowan was like, you didn't know she was Valg at the time. And Aelin was like, yeah, I kind of guessed she was Valg. And so I put it in there anyway. And Rowan says, if that works, if they somehow revolt against the army, turn against her, he shook his head, laughing softly. It would be a boon in this war. I scheme and lie so grandly, and that's all the credit I get, Aelin says. And Rowan like laughs and he says, okay, any other surprises? And Aelin is like, no more right now. Pinky promise. And Rowan's like, I don't know whether to be relieved or not. Like, kind of worrisome that you don't have any surprises. And Aelin is like, yeah, everything I know, you know. All the cards are on the table now. Then they kind of talk about what had happened, and Aelin explains that, like, she'll never be able to draw on that much power again. Like, the only reason she was able to build up that much power was because she was in irons that prevented her magic from, like, leaking out of her. Otherwise, she would have kind of, like, exploded in those months building up that power. And Rowan is like, okay, well, we're never going to put you in that situation again, so yes, this shan't happen again. And then she says to him, she thinks, and because he was the only person who saw everything she was and did not walk away from it, Aelin said, I wanted that fire to be for Maeve. Rowan goes, I know. Such simple words, and yet it meant everything that he understood. I wanted to make things better. She loosed a long breath, to wipe it all away, every memory, every nightmare, every lie. And Rowan says, it will take a while, Aelin, to face it, to work through it. And Aelin is like, I just want it to all be over. Like, all of it. The wars, the gods, the locks, the word gates. I want to go to Terrasen and fight this last battle and just be done. And Rowan says, okay, so we will make sure the Khaghan's army goes north with us, and then we're going to deal with this lock situation, and then we will be done. And then she lays in bed and she starts playing with a ball of magic, with this, like, water magic that is from her mother. She has this huge gift of fire magic that is from Galathinius line, but she has this water magic that is Ash River, and it's very small. She's like this very small, faint magic, but it is this gift from her mother, so it feels very precious to her. Then Rowan and Aelin finally get up for the day, and everyone in the hallways is whispering about them, and Aelin finds it, like, funny. She's just, like, having, she's, like, feeling a little bit more like herself, I think. They get a snack, they're, like, starving, and then they go make out in a stairwell, but then they're called into a meeting, and it's a big meeting with, like, literally everyone in the study, and it's the first time that Cashin and Aelin meet. Nesrin, like, checks in on Aelin and makes sure she is feeling better. And then Rowan turns to the Southern Continent contingent, all the princes and princesses from the Southern Continent, and is like, hey, have you guys decided where you will march next? And Hussar says, north. We shall indeed go north with you, if only to repay you for saving our army, our people. But also, Morath is focused on Terrasen right now, so, like, actually strategically it makes the most sense for us to go north with you anyway. And Aelin is like, how bad is it? Everyone is in Terrasen. Like, how bad is Terrasen right now? And Nesrin is like, well, the details are murky, but troops are headed north, leaving, like, destruction in their wake. Like, we know there's a pretty substantial number of troops in Terrasen right now. Kael's father said, I hope that power of yours can be summoned again. Aelin let an ember of that power smolder in her eyes. Thank you for the armor, she crooned. Consider it an early coronation gift, the Lord of Anielle countered with a mocking smile. And then they, like, start to kind of make plans. They really want to head north soon, but they know if they head, like, directly north along the Ferian River, they're going to have to go through the Ferian Gap, and then they're going to have to, like, directly engage with the witches, like, in their territory. And they know that's not going to work super well. And that it would actually probably be better to go through the White Fangs, but the White Fangs are really, like, difficult to navigate and also quite treacherous, and that's where the wild men of the White Fangs live, and so risky business. And Aelin's like, well, if we, like, maybe could strike up an alliance with them, they could get us through these mountains, they could act as a guide. And Daddy Westfall is unwilling to give, like, any slice of Anielle to the wild men. Like, he's like, no, absolutely not. Aelin shrugged and then turned to Kael. Well, it's settled then. What's settled? Kael's father ground out. Aelin ignored him and winked at her friend. You are the hand to the king of Ardelane. You outrank your father. You're authorized to act on Dorian's behalf. She gestured to the map. That land might be part of Anielle, but it belongs to Ardelane. Go ahead and barter it. Aelin is like, okay, well, if you're not going to play nice, I will go over your head. And going over your head is going to your head, which is even better. And so that's all set. But then Hussar turns to Kael and is like, hey, is Yrene anywhere near done? And Kael says, no, even with the few survivors, there's too many of them. We would be here for weeks if we let her heal all of them. And Rowan's like, wait, how many were injured? Like, I didn't think we had that many injured, that it would take weeks to heal them. And Kael shook his head. Not injured, his jaw tightened. Valg. Aelin frowned. Irene's healing the Valg, Hussar grinned, in a manner of speaking. Aelin waved her off. Can I see? And then they all head out to a medical tent where Yrene is working. The gang arrives and Yrene is like, is everything okay? Like, why are you all out here? And Kael is like, they want a demonstration of what you can do. Yrene is like, well, it's not really anything you can see happening. It's what happens beneath the skin. It's a mind-to-mind sort of connection. You go up against the Valg demons directly, Fenrir said with no small amount of awe. And Aelin says, show me. Do whatever you do, but show me. And so Yrene does, hands on this man's chest, and he's, like, writhing around and he's screaming. And Bort is like, it's kind of boring, actually, when they're, like, tied down. They just, like, kind of thrash around and scream. And Aelin is like, how many does that make today, this man? And Bort says 10. She's done 10 already today. And Aelin is like, how many can she do most days? Chaol says 15 at most. Some of them are more difficult than others and it takes longer. Aelin, and once they are cured, what do you do with them? Chaol's like, we interrogate them. And Gabrielle's like, so you free them and then you torture them? And Hasar's like, this is war. She said simply, we leave them able to function, but we will not risk sparing their lives only to find a new army at our backs. Like, no, we're not just like letting them go. And Chaol's like, well, so the thing is, some of them did join Erewhon's army willingly. Some of them willingly took those rings, knowing what they were signing up for. While Yrene is in there, she can tell the difference. She's essentially like kind of like sifting through their memories. And so she lets us know like who had good intentions and who has bad intention. And Sartaq goes on, some of them want to fight for us. If they pass our vetting process, we begin to train them as foot soldiers. They look over at the guy on the bed, pukes up a bunch of black gunk, and he's healed. Valg demon, be gone. And Yrene says to no one in particular, that demon did not want to go. But it's gone now, Aelin asked. Yrene pointed to the man on the cot, now opening his eyes, brown, not black, as he gazed upward. Thank you, was all the man said, his voice raw and human. Utterly human. Yrene is so cool. She's so cool. So after they leave that, Aelin and Rowan go on a little walk through the battlefield. The plan is to leave for Terrasen in 2 days. Aelin is once again like at a loss at what she's supposed to do. She's feeling so over her head. And she says, it would take years, she observed, to heal everyone infected by the Valg. And Rowan says, yes, but each of those soldiers has a family, friends who would want us to try. And Aelin is like, I know that. And then she says, do you think Yrene could use that same power to heal Erewhon or Maeve? And Rowan says, maybe, but I don't know if it's the same. Like, their bodies might be made rather than, like, stolen. And Aelin's like, I don't think I could ask that of Yrene anyway. I couldn't ask that of her or from Chaol. To even put Yrene near Erewhon or Maeve, I don't think I could do it. Then she says, but is it a mistake to put Irene's safety above that of the entire world? She's the greatest weapon we have. If the keys are not in play, are we fools not to push her to use it? And Rowan knows that it's not his call, but he's like willing to be like a sounding board for her, to like let her bounce her thoughts off of. And he asks her, will you be able to live with yourself if something happens to Yrene, to her unborn child? I could live with that guilt if I knew it was for, like, if it saved the world. You know, I would get over it. And if you don't push Yrene to try to destroy them and Erewhon or Maeve wins, what then? Aelin says, there's still the lock. There's still me. Rowan says, Yrene is a ray of hope for you, for us, that you might not need to forge the lock at all, you or Dorian. And Aelin's like, the gods demand it. I don't think there's a way I'm getting out of this. Rowan says, the gods can go to hell. I hate this, I really do. And then she says, if it were me, if I were Yrene, if I were carrying our child, would you let me do it? Would you let me try? He failed to block out the image of that dream of Aelin heavily pregnant, their children all around her. I don't let you do anything, he says. She waved a hand. You know what I mean. He took a moment to answer. No. Even if the world ended because of it, I couldn't bear it. And Aelin is like, okay. Anyway, I need to go see those books that Chaol brought that had the word marks at them. And so they go into one of the tents and they're looking through these books. Bort is helping Aelin go through the books and translating any of the bits that are in the language of the Southern Continent while Aelin reads the word marks. They've been looking for hours at this point and so far have found nothing useful. And eventually they wind up going through the entire trunk of books and nothing in there is helpful. Then we get a little conversation between Chaol and Daddy Westfall. Daddy Westfall is yelling at Chaol about giving away the territory to the wild men. He's really not happy about this. And Chaol says, if offering them a small piece of land will mean that future generations of Anielle men and women won't have to fight or die, I think our ancestors would be pleased. Everyone in this war is making sacrifices, most far, far greater than a few miles of land. Be grateful, that is all we are asking of you. And Chaol's dad is like, what if I was to bargain with you? Don't you wish to know what your brother wrote me? And Chaol's like, yeah, oh, whatever, I think you're gonna tell me regardless. Chaol's dad reads a letter that Terran, his brother, sent. Terran, I hope Anielle burns to the ground and you with it. That's how the heir feels about this place. He will not protect Anielle, so you have to come back and be in charge here because, clearly your brother isn't gonna do it. And Chaol's like, I think probably his feelings about Anielle are really tied into his feelings about you. If you were out of the picture, I think he'd probably feel better about this place, to be honest. And his dad is like, I am willing to bargain with you. And Chaol's like, I don't want anything from you. I am a rich man. I need nothing you can offer. Daddy Westfall is like, what if I could offer you something more priceless than gold? And he rolls out this trunk of letters that are from Chaol's mom. And he says that Chaol's mom has been writing him letters almost every day since Chaol has left. Since the day he left. he intercepted all of them. Cale never knew that his mother wanted to talk to him. He thought his mother had just like been like, bye, see you later, see you never. Yeah, and there was like a tragedy there, and Cale also realizes then, you let her believe I didn't write back, Cale said, surprised to find his voice still calm. You never sent them and let her believe I didn't write back. Like, Cale is not upset for himself. Although I think he is a little upset for himself, but he's mostly upset for his mother. His father shut the trunk and locked it again. It would appear so. Why? It was the only question that mattered. His father frowned. I couldn't allow you to walk away from your birthright, from Anielle without consequences, could I? And Cale's like, Stu, I'm just like a little confused on why you thought showing me this trunk full of letters that you never sent to me was going to convince me to bargain with you. And his father's like, well, you're super sentimental. I've seen how you are with your wife. I think you would bargain quite a bit to be able to read these letters. And Cale was like, no, I don't, like, keep the letters. Now that she's left, it might be your only way to remember her. Like, I don't need my mom's letters from 10 years ago. Anyway, so Cale has given a small slice of Anielle to the men of the Wild Things. It's just like a couple mile stretch. And because of that, they have a small group of Wild Thing men that are going to help lead the army through the mountains. And behind them moves half of the Crochans' army. So half of the Crochans' army is going to move through the mountains with them, and the other half is going to march with caution. Because what's going to happen is one half of the group is going to come up the eastern side to kind of draw the witches out of the Ferian Gap, and then the other ones are going to come up the like mountain side. But then they won't have to deal with the witches in the gap, you know? It'll work out. It's going to take about 3 days for Cashin to reach Terrasen on the flat part up the river. It's going to take them 5 days for Aelin and the mountain grow. And this is where we're going to end this part, okay? The Crochans' army had crossed every terrain, though. Mountains and deserts and seas. They did not balk now. So Aelin supposed she would not either, for whatever time she had left until it was over. This final push north, homeward. She smiled grimly at the looming mountains, at the army stretching behind them. And just because she could, just because they were headed to Terrasen at last, Aelin unleashed a flicker of her power. Some of the standard bearers behind them murmured in surprise, but Rowan only smiled. Smiled with that fierce hope, that brutal determination that flared in her own heart as she began to burn. She let the flame encompass her, a golden glow that she knew could be spied even from the farthest lines of the army, from the city and the keep they left behind. A beacon, glowing bright in the shadows of the mountain, in the shadows of the forces that awaited them. Aelin lit the way north. And that's where we end. It's so good. I have no idea how long I've been filming. But I did start at I took several breaks. I think 6 hours with mini breaks. We're here in the book. We have this much to go. I think it'll be 2 more videos. I think the next video, we have to go through the worst of it. I do think the next video is the bad place. What if we just didn't? What if we stopped here and we said, they did it. I wrote you an epilogue in which everyone lived happily ever after and had the best time ever. That Erewhon said, actually, what if we just went home? And he took Maeve with him. My epilogue? I don't think so. Unfortunately, we have to go through the bad place. But it's going to be fun. We'll go through it together. Hand in hand. I will see you then. Have a gorgeous rest of your day. I will see you in the next Kingdom of Ash video as we head to Terrasen at last. Okay. Bye.